carried to bed by the scumbag's younger uncle. Fang Li followed Gu Mingzhou for 7 years, but he sent her to prison for a word from a fake daughter. On the day of her release, he rushed to warn her. Has prison life taught you a lesson? In the future, be a good person and don't fight with Yu Xin. She is different from women like you. Fang Li broke off the engagement and turned to marry his uncle. Chapter 1, she was released from prison, but he still wouldn't let her go. Fang Li stepped out of prison as rain drizzled from the sky. The oversized sleeves of her coat wrapped around her emaciated body. A gust of cold wind hit her, making her shiver as she hugged herself. 3 years. She never thought she would walk out of prison alive. Leaning against the wall, she moved forward numbly. Her legs were weak, and every step was slow. The feet that once danced ballet now felt as if they were treading on the edge of a blade with each step. At that moment, a KN pulled up in front of her, blocking her path. When she saw the license plate, Fang Li's face instantly turned pale, and a complex emotion flashed through her eyes. The car window rolled down, revealing the cold, aristocratic face of a man. Lame now. Gu Mingzhou's gaze swept over Fang Li's legs, his voice devoid of any emotion. A sudden sting rose in Fang Li's eyes. This was the fiancé she had loved for 7 years. And it was also him who had personally sent her to prison. Was this question out of concern? From the very first day she was incarcerated, her fellow inmates had brutally beaten her. They said Gu Mingzhou had paid them to give her special treatment. Get in. Gu Mingzhou rested his arm casually on the car window. His tailored suit accentuated his upright posture, exuding an air of cold, aristocratic indifference. If it weren't for that person's orders, he wouldn't have bothered coming to pick her up. Fang Li could hear the impatience in his voice. Just like her parents. At 16, she had been brought back to the Fang family. At first, her parents felt guilty and wanted to make it up to her. But because of the fake daughter they had raised for 14 years, they slowly distanced themselves from her. On the day she was falsely accused by Fang Yuxin at 18, all of the Fang family's long-suppressed emotions finally erupted. Yes, your sister isn't our biological daughter, but what's her fault? She grew up with us for over a decade. We've already brought you back, what more do you want? Fang Li, how could you do something like that to your sister? You weren't raised by us, so you'll never be as obedient and sensible as her. But what had she even done? Why did they never believe her? Not even once. I said, get in the car. Gu Mingzhou's gaze briefly swept over Fang Li's legs, and his brows furrowed. Her pale skin was marred by a hideous scar at her ankle, as if a sharp object had slashed across it, leaving a grotesque centipede-like wound. Gu Mingzhou quickly averted his gaze and called out, Cowan. The assistant in the driver's seat immediately stepped out and respectfully said, Miss Fang, Mr. Gu requests you to get in the car. Seeing Fang Li remain motionless, Cowan reached out to pull her. In a conditioned response, Fang Li crouched down, covering her head as she pleaded in a trembling voice, No, please don't hit me. Cowan froze, startled by her reaction. She had changed too much. At first glance, he almost didn't recognize her. The once bright, innocent, and cheerful socialite everyone's beloved, white moonlight, was now completely devoid of that light. She was curled up, fearful, and broken. It had only been 3 years in prison. How had the once proud daughter of the Fang family turned into this? Cowan instinctively turned back to look at Gu Mingzhou. The latter remained calm, his face indifferent, betraying no emotion. Fang Li, how long do you plan to keep me waiting? 3 years in prison still haven't taught you obedience. Fang Li slowly stood up and silently got into the car, instinctively keeping her distance from Gu Mingzhou. The warmth of the car's heating system enveloped her, but she still curled into a corner. Maybe because she had been in the rain and the cold for too long, her head felt dizzy. She tried to hold it in, but she couldn't. She sneezed. Just then, the car drove over a speed bump. Fang Li, caught off guard, lost her balance and fell forward, landing on the car mat on her knees. Gu Mingzhou, who had been resting with his eyes closed, snapped them open at the noise. He glanced at her. Fang Li, you really are pathetic. Pathetic? Fang Li took a deep breath. Because of that single word, the car mat beneath her feet suddenly felt scorching, and she could barely sit still. She shrank further into herself, trying to make her presence as small as possible, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I'll clean the mat later. Before she could finish, Gu Mingzhou cut her off with a cold voice. No need. I'll have it all thrown away. Thrown away? Just because she had touched it. Fang Li's lips trembled slightly, and a trace of bitterness surfaced on her face. She turned her gaze to the passing street outside the window, her eyes turning red. She was dirty. In Gu Mingzhou's eyes, even the things she touched were filthy and had to be discarded. In your eyes, only Fang Yusin is clean, isn't she? Gu Mingzhou's expression darkened, and for the first time, his voice carried a hint of anger. You don't deserve to mention her. This is your last chance. If you ever lay a hand on Yusin again, what prison couldn't he teach you? I'll make sure someone else does. Chapter 2, your seduction skills have improved. Fang Li's face turned pale in an instant, her eyes dimming. Of course. 3 years of living hell, she should have learned her lesson. She took a deep breath, suppressing the emotions surging within her, her fingers unconsciously tightening into fists. As the car passed under a bridge, Gu Mingzhou's face flickered between light and shadow. Just like before, cold, distant. Fang Li swallowed the bitterness in her throat and asked, unwilling to let it go, Ming, was it really you who bribed those people in prison? She had broken down countless times, even thought about ending it all. But she couldn't bear to leave Gu Mingzhou. She was even afraid that without her care, he wouldn't live well. She couldn't believe he could be so ruthless to her. Yet, as their gazes met, Gu Mingzhou simply said indifferently, what kind of answer do you want to hear? Fang Li froze, then let out a bitter smile. Was that an admission? In Gu Mingzhou's eyes, she had been jealous of Fang Yusin and had hired people to abduct her, almost causing her to be violated. The evidence was irrefutable. Fang Li had no way to defend herself. If anyone was to blame, it was Fang Yusin for being ruthless enough to wager her own innocence. And she had won the bet. Har har har. Suddenly, Fang Li found her 7 years of love utterly ridiculous. Her gaze was vacant until the car stopped in front of what used to be her and Gu Mingzhou's marital home. Every detail of the house had been carefully curated by Fang Li, from the renovation materials to the placement of flower pots. She had even personally painted the walls, determined to be involved in every step. She had spent countless days and nights fantasizing about living here with Gu Mingzhou. But now, the place was filled with Fang Yusin's belongings. A sharp pain pierced through Fang Li's heart. Her lips turned pale from biting them too hard. This was not just cruelty, this was a punishment worse than death. Gu Mingzhou seemed oblivious to the woman's emotions behind him. He simply instructed the maid who had come to greet them, she's filthy. Take her to clean up first. The maid nodded and led Fang Li to the bathroom. Once inside, the maid covered her nose, hesitating. Unable to hold back, she said with disgust, Miss, how long has it been since you last bathed? You're a young woman, how can you be so unhygienic? She was only 24. Didn't she want to be clean? Fang Li said nothing and dismissed the maid, locking the bathroom door behind her. She washed herself for a full hour. Her body bore scars. 3 years of special treatment, even though the last month had been free from torment, the old wounds had never fully healed. Some scars were hidden from sight, layered in shades of blue and purple. Some were from pinches, scratches, kicks. Others had been carved into her skin with sharp objects. There were no proper medicines in prison. Some untreated wounds festered and became infected. The worst of them all was a long scar on her left foot. For over a year, every rainy day brought her unbearable pain. It was likely a permanent affliction. But it didn't matter. It would get better eventually. Every time the pain became too much, Fang Li comforted herself with those words. The maid had prepared clean clothes. Fang Li numbly put them on, finding them unexpectedly well fitted. But as soon as she opened the door, she collided head-on with Gu Mingzhou. She had no time to dodge and lost her balance, about to fall backward. On instinct, Gu Mingzhou reached out and wrapped an arm around her waist. His reaction was purely reflexive. For a moment, Fang Li was stunned as she crashed into his chest. The embrace caught them both off guard. Gu Mingzhou smelled strongly of nicotine. The fabric of his shirt wrinkled beneath her fingers. Realizing what had happened, Fang Li quickly stepped back, putting distance between them. She spoke with deliberate detachment. I'm sorry, Mr. Gu. It wasn't intentional. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the cigarette between his fingers. She guessed he had been heading out for a smoke when they crossed paths. "What did you just call me?" Gu Mingzhou's gaze turned icy in an instant. His sharp eyes narrowed as they fell on her. "Mr. Gu. Fang Li, what kind of game are you playing this time?" Fang Li bit her lips and lowered her head, her eyes quickly turning red. It seemed that no matter what she did, she was always in the wrong in the eyes of the man who didn't love her. The lingering warmth from her touch still clung to Gu Mingzhou's fingertips. A shadow flickered across his eyes as he placed the cigarette back between his lips. He refused to acknowledge the strange emptiness that spread through him the moment Fang Li pulled away. Especially now, with her eyes rimmed red, his innate cruelty made him want to break her even more. Gu Mingzhou lit his cigarette, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed down his rising frustration. "I didn't expect that after 3 years in prison, your seduction skills would be even sharper." His lips curled into a mocking smirk. "What's the matter? Are you that desperate?" Chapter 3, Be good, don't provoke her. Fang Li suddenly found herself unable to breathe. Unconsciously, she clenched the edge of her sleeve, her nails digging into her palm. If he didn't love her, then so be it. Why did he have to humiliate her like this? It took a while for Fang Li to regain her composure. She lifted her head, looked at Gu Mingzhou, and smiled. "Ming, you can't just insult me recklessly just because I like you." Gu Mingzhou was momentarily stunned. Perhaps it had been too long since he had seen Fang Li smile like this, and he couldn't help but take another glance. But by then, Fang Li had already lowered her head. Gu Mingzhou loosened his tie and extinguished the cigarette between his fingers. Fang Li had changed, though he was reluctant to admit it. She didn't smile as much as she used to. Like a shattered vase or a withered rose, it shouldn't have mattered to him, yet for some reason, it left him feeling inexplicably irritated. Suppressing his chaotic thoughts, he reminded her, "It's Yu Xin's birthday soon. I'll be taking you back to the Fang family. But remember, be good and don't provoke her. Yu Xin is not like a woman like you." Fang Li froze, a sharp pain piercing her heart. In Gu Mingzhou's eyes, Fang Yu Xin was a proud rose, while she wasn't even worthy of being a mere leaf. An hour later, Fang Li was shoved into a car by Cowan. The Fang family's grand hall was bustling with guests. Even though Fang Yu Xin was not the Fang family's biological daughter, her birthday was still celebrated extravagantly every year. One reason was to showcase the Fang family's status in high society, and another was to express their importance to Fang Yu Xin and offer her support. Everyone who held any influence in the Beijing elite circle had received an invitation from the Fang family. Inside the hall, a group of wealthy ladies was gossiping, as usual, about the affairs of high society. "Fang Yu Xin isn't even President Fang's biological daughter? Why is she so favored? Could there be some hidden reason?" Someone asked in confusion. "She's capable and resourceful. In our circle, isn't that what matters most? Blood ties aren't important, bringing benefits to the family is." Another wealthy lady nodded in agreement. "I heard that in just 6 months at the company, Fang Yu Xin secured several major deals. The other day, Fang Fu was so pleased that he directly promoted her to deputy director. It seems like he's grooming her as the heir." "That may be true, but she's still an outsider. Aren't the Fang couple practically giving away their company? What about her biological parents? Why hasn't she returned to them? They haven't been found," someone in the know chimed in. "What's strange is that, logically, the woman who adopted Fang Li, Li Chezhen, should be Fang Yu Xin's mother. But they did a DNA test, and it turns out they're not related." Hearing this, Fang Li clenched her hands tightly. She still couldn't understand why Fang Yu Xin and Li Chezhen weren't biologically related. She had initially thought that her adoptive mother had swapped her and Fang Yu Xin to give her own daughter a better life, but it turned out that Fang Yu Xin wasn't Li Chezhen's daughter either. No one knew exactly what had gone wrong. The final outcome was this: Li Chezhen lost her daughter, Fang Li returned to the Fang family, and Fang Yu Xin's origins remained a mystery. Because of that, Fang Yu Xin had lived in the Fang household for over 20 years. Having raised her since childhood, the Fang couple treated Fang Yu Xin no differently from a biological daughter, perhaps even better. As the wealthy ladies continued chatting, their gazes inadvertently landed on Fang Li. Sensing their scrutiny, Fang Li lowered her head and quickly left their hall. As soon as she walked away, the woman who had started the topic remarked, "Didn't that woman just now look a lot like Fang Li?" The others followed her gaze. Fang Li? Impossible. You know how stunning her face and figure were. That scrawny woman just now. You must be joking. Not to mention that their temperaments were completely different. Fang Li was the kind of beauty that stood out even in a crowd of gorgeous women. But the woman just now had been utterly unremarkable. Upstairs, Fang Li had no idea she had become the subject of discussion. She stood outside a room, just about to push the door open. But then, the conversation inside sent an icy chill through her veins. Mingzhou, I heard Fang Li was released from prison. Is that true? Fang Li? The one who used to chase after Mingzhou all the time. When did she go to prison? What crime did she commit? The Fang family valued their reputation, so no outsiders knew about Fang Li's imprisonment. Fang Fu had ordered a strict cover-up, telling everyone that she had gone abroad to study. Yu Mingzhou shot Li Fan a cold glance. Realizing his slip of the tongue, Li Fan smacked his forehead and tried to make amends by feeding a good card to Yu Mingzhou in the game. Look at me running my mouth. What I meant was, she returned to the country. Fang Li came back. One of the rich heirs bit down on his cigarette. How do you mix up return to the country with released from prison? Li Fan, I think your problem isn't your mouth, it's your brain. Li Fan cursed with a laugh, screw you. My brain works just fine. The rich heir circled back to the topic. So Fang Li is back. Things around Mingzhou are going to get interesting. If I remember correctly, you two got engaged 3 years ago, right? Mingzhou, when's the wedding? Fang Li's hand, poised to push the door open, paused. She could tell they were playing cards inside. Had her room become a gambling den? Li Fan chuckled with an odd expression. Engaged? Are you joking? Marriage means having someone control you. How boring is that? Mingzhou isn't he the type to be shackled by marriage. Chapter 4. She is dirty, I will give it to you. The second-generation rich man laughed, but Fang Li is pretty, with that face and that figure, she'd be a nice-looking vase at home. He threw out a card, half jokingly and half reminding her, if they don't get engaged, are you really willing to let her marry someone else? Mingzhou, just lie to us, but don't lie to yourself. Gu Mingzhou's expression was cold. She's already dirty, you still like her. Seeing that everyone was interested, he felt a little depressed, but still said, if you like it, I'll give it to you. The second-generation rich man was stunned. Everyone knows that Fang Li only has you in her heart. She has been following you closely all these years. I don't have such good fortune. Fang Li outside the door was stunned, and a feeling of sourness uncontrollably surged into her eyes. She likes Yu Mingzhou, and everyone in the circle knows it. But Yu Mingzhou trampled on her sincerity and treated her as an object and gave her away casually. The dizzy and suffocating feeling overwhelmed her and made her breathing difficult. Suddenly, I seemed to be back to when I was 14 years old. She was taken from the county town to the capital and sent to the best aristocratic school by Fang Fu, who taught her to respect her sister and be sensible. But Fang Yusin never treated her as her sister, and even led a group of rich kids to isolate her. At an age when people most longed for family and playmates, she was locked in the bathroom and had ice water poured over her head. In the blizzard, she was shivering with cold and shouting at the top of her lungs. It was Yu Mingzhou again who kicked open the toilet door. To this day, Fang Li still remembers the scene clearly. Yu Mingzhou put one foot on the steps, with snow flying all over the sky behind him. His open black and white school uniform was blown up by the wind, his slightly wet hair was draped over his forehead, and the young man was full of vigor. For you. He took off the scarf from his neck and threw it to her. From then on, 17-year-old Yu Mingzhou became the first ray of light that illuminated her life. She became Yu Mingzhou's little tail, following him for 7 years. But now, this light illuminates others. Completely, no longer belonged to her. Fang Li suppressed the bitterness in her heart, made up her mind to leave and walked to the window. She found a long-lost number and dialed it. The phone rang twice, and before anyone answered, someone called her from behind. Fang Li? It's only been a few years and you've already been released from prison. Fang Li felt a lump in her throat, hung up the phone, and turned to look at the person who came. Sun Wanqi walked over and became more and more surprised the more she looked. When did you? Waiting for it to come out. And faded again. Look. Sun Wanqi remembered Fang Yusin's birthday, but she didn't remember that her biological daughter was released from prison today. Why are you so thin? Sun Wanqi frowned and looked Fang Li up and down. It's good to endure some hardships. After suffering, you will be sensible. Don't argue with your sister and make the family restless. Your father and I will not care about the past. Today is your and your sister's birthday. You should be good and change into a dress and come down quickly to celebrate for your sister. After she finished speaking, she seemed to have just remembered something. Oh, by the way, during the 3 years you were away, your room has been temporarily converted into a card room. Go to your sister's room to change first. I'll have someone send your clothes over. Fang Li was pushed into Fang Yuxin's room. As soon as she entered, she felt physically uncomfortable due to the fragrance inside. She rushed to the bathroom and retched. Just then there was a noise outside the door. It was the servant coming to deliver the dress. She lay on the sink, her eyes filled with moisture. She waited until the nausea passed before washing her face and leaving. The servant had been waiting in the room. When he saw Fang Li come out, he looked her up and down. I'm not pregnant. Fang Li knew what the servant wanted to say. She had just vomited so much that her eyes were red, and she looked very weak. Tell Fang Yuxin not to make a fuss about this. The servant smiled awkwardly upon hearing this. What are you talking about, miss? Hurry up and put on your dress and come down. Madam is waiting. Fang Li didn't say anything. This birthday party was prepared for Fang Yuxin, and she was just a foil. She didn't want to endure the nausea and act out some sisterly love scene with Fang Yuxin, so she went to the kitchen to get some food. I had just taken 2 bites when someone knocked on the door. It was the same servant again. Madam has something to ask you, miss, please go down quickly. Fang Li slowly swallowed the last bite of food before looking up at her. I'm not feeling well, I don't want to go down. The servant was stunned, obviously not expecting Fang Li to refuse. She frowned. Madam said that today is your and the eldest lady's birthday. It's not appropriate for you not to show your face. It will make the sisters look unharmonious. Madam also said that if you are not sensible, you can go to prison to study for a few more years. Chapter 5. Let's destroy together. When have Fang Yuxin and I ever gotten along? The servant was choked by these words, but fortunately Fang Li had already stood up and walked out. In the hall, Fang Yuxin, who was dressed in a gorgeous dress, was surrounded by a group of rich girls. She was holding a glass of white wine and was about to raise it to her lips. Suddenly, an abrupt voice came. Miss, you must not drink this wine, there is something added to it. Fang Yuxin was surprised. What did you add? The maid who was speaking glanced at Fang Li and said, I just saw the second young lady go to the kitchen and mix something into your wine. It should be some medicine. As soon as the words came out, several people's faces changed. Everyone in the Fang family knew that in the kidnapping case 3 years ago, Fang Yuxin was taken away quietly by the gangsters because she drank wine spiked with something. Now that she heard that the wine had been spiked with something else, Fang Yuxin's face turned pale and the goblet in her hand shattered to the ground. The sound of the wine glass breaking was too harsh, and many people looked over in surprise. Fang Yuxin's eyes were red, and she threw herself into Sun Wanqi's arms. Mom! I'm so scared. Sun Wanqi knew what Fang Yuxin was thinking, and patted her on the back. Don't be afraid, it's all over. After saying that, Sun Wanqi looked at Fang Li again. You still refuse to change. There were many people present today, and Sun Wanqi was concerned about the Fang family's reputation and did not point it out directly. But Fang Li knew what she was talking about. When the old things were brought up again, Fang Li suddenly wanted to laugh. She didn't expect Fang Yuxin to use this matter twice. Was she trying to stab the same person twice? Not me. Fang Li glanced at the wine in the decanter. Fang Yuxin loved white wine, and this wine was specially blended for her. It seemed that it had been prepared in advance. I did go to the kitchen, but I went there to get food, not to drug her. Maid, but I saw the second young lady add something to it with my own eyes. I guarantee it with my life. The maid spoke with great confidence, just like a weak person who upholds justice and disregards the power of the powerful. People around were pointing and talking, and there was a lot of discussion. Sun Wanqi was afraid that the matter would get out of hand and end badly. After all, it was a family matter and anyone could say whatever they wanted behind closed doors, but it would be somewhat embarrassing if it got to the ears of outsiders. Fang Yuxin saw what Sun Wanqi was thinking and smiled at her gently. Mom, I think there's a misunderstanding. Ali has been in prison for 3 years and will not make the same mistake twice. I believe she is innocent. Of. As soon as their words fell, everyone was shocked. The second daughter of the Fang family was in prison for 3 years. Didn't she go abroad to study? They are all wealthy ladies from the upper class, and the word prison is far away from their lives. But they are very clear that once they are associated with these two words, their lives will be tarnished. Not only will they be banned from politics for life, but even their close relatives within 3 generations will be affected. In the hall, discussions were heard one after another. Fang Yusin seemed to have just realized that she had said something wrong. She covered her lips in shock and said with a guilty look on her face, "I was drunk and talking nonsense. Please don't take it seriously. How could my sister have been to prison? After what just happened, it's hard to avoid making things worse by saying these words now to make amends." The more guilty Fang Yusin acted, the more it proved to be true. "Ali, you just came back from abroad. Have you adjusted to the jet lag? Today is both of our birthdays. I specially prepared a gift for you. I'll take you to see it." Fang Yusin tried to save something. Perhaps the noise downstairs was too loud, and Yu Mingzhou, who was playing cards upstairs, was also alarmed. When the group came down, they saw Fang Yusin, who looked fragile and pitiful, standing in the crowd and apologizing to Fang Li. Her eyes were red, her hands were clasped nervously, and she carefully observed Fang Li's expression. Fang Li turned to look at her. Similar things have happened countless times in the past, but every time Fang Yusin manages to play the role of an innocent victim. Fang Li pursed her lips, and the people around her kept looking at her strangely. But what did she do wrong? What had she done wrong to deserve such a false accusation? Why was she framed by Fang Yusin like this? 3 years in jail isn't enough? Telling so many people about her imprisonment, isn't it just to see how her life is ruined? Okay. Let us destroy them together. Chapter 6. Yes, I have been to prison. Yes, I was in jail. Fang Li's eyes swept across everyone and finally fell on Fang Yusin's face. Fang Yusin tried to pull Fang Li's hand. "Ali, stop talking nonsense. I've already said it, I just spoke too quickly and said nonsense." Fang Li dodged backwards, not wanting Fang Yusin to touch her, and suddenly pulled her hand away. Unexpectedly, Fang Yusin somehow stepped on the hem of her skirt and fell to the ground. The fall was quite severe, and there were fragments of the glass on the ground that had just fallen and had not been cleaned up in time. Gu Mingzhou immediately rushed out, walked through the crowd, and helped Fang Yusin up. Fang Yusin's palm was a bloody mess, with many fragments piercing into her skin. Gu Mingzhou's eyes were filled with anger, staring at Fang Li with eyes so red that they were scary. "Fang Li, you still won't learn your lesson. I warned you." Fang Li's heart trembled. Even though she knew that Gu Mingzhou didn't have her in his heart, she still felt chilled when she saw him protecting other women. "What did I do? I just pulled my hand out, and she fell to the ground on her own." Looking at their intertwined fingers, Fang Li felt extremely ironic. She stopped looking at him and lowered her eyelids, gently touching a certain spot on her upper chest. There was a jade pendant hidden there, which was once given to her by someone. In prison, Fang Li endured many times when she was about to collapse and couldn't hold on any longer, but she managed to get through it by holding onto this jade pendant. When she looked up again, Fang Li's eyes turned cold. She pulled her lips into a smile and continued, "Yes, I was in prison, but I was framed." When Sun Wanqi saw Fang Li publicly admit that she had been to such a dirty place, her face turned ugly. Originally, Fang Yusin revealed the fact that Fang Li was in jail, and she suspected that Fang Yusin did it on purpose. But when she saw Fang Yusin apologize to Fang Li in public and trying every means to cover up the matter, she felt that Fang Yusin was careless. How could Fang Yusin, whom she had watched grow up, have such bad thoughts? Sun Wanqi didn't want things to get complicated, so she tried to make a big deal out of it. "Fang Li, you must have drunk too much. I'll have someone help you sober up." Fang Li seemed not to hear and continued to talk to herself. "If I had kidnapped her 3 years ago, I would have had 10,000 ways to make Fang Yusin disappear. How could I have left clues for you to find her?" Bang! A heavy slap landed on Fang Li's face. Fang Fu came out of the study room at some point. He scolded with a cold face, "Fang Li, what are you talking about? Shut up." Her cheeks were burning with pain, but Fang Li didn't care at all. At that time, Fang Yusin only suffered minor skin injuries. If those people really wanted to rape her, they should have done so while tying her up in the car. Why did they go to the trouble of taking her to an abandoned factory? Isn't that a waste of time? The spectators who were watching the excitement around did not expect things to turn out like this, and they all widened their eyes in surprise. Fang Yuxin was almost raped by a gangster? The pointing eyes all around reached Fang Yuxin. She bit her lips and her face turned pale. Fang Fu was very angry with Fang Li. This matter was a taboo in the Fang family. No one dared to mention it in the past 3 years. But Fang Li not only brought it up, but also said it in front of so many people. Not to make fun of you. One daughter went to jail, and the other was almost raped, all because of a fight between two sisters. I've lost face so much. Fang Yuxin, who was standing by, had already had tears in her eyes. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling, and her tears rolled down to the ground. Fang Li sneered. Can't you bear this? Compared to what she had been through, what was this? Sun Wanqi glared at Fang Li, signaling her to shut up. The matter had been decided 3 years ago. She and Fang Fu tacitly agreed to send Fang Li to prison for training because Fang Li refused to admit her mistakes and they felt she was hopeless. She also wondered if the punishment was too severe. After all, Fang Li was still the daughter of the Fang family. But Fang Yuxin said that it was precisely because Fang Li was a member of the Fang family that those people in the prison did not dare to do anything to her. If Fang Li was not taught a lesson through this incident, she might go astray in the future. Sun Wanqi thought about it and it made sense. After all, Fang Li grew up with Li Qiaozhen. So who is Li Qiaozhen? Fang Li raised a son who gambles and does nothing all day long. It's time for him to become more patient after growing up in such an environment. Fang Li, why are you bringing this up? Sun Wanqi was furious, her face full of dissatisfaction. Didn't you see your sister was crying? A hint of sarcasm flashed across Fang Li's cold face. Yeah, I just went to jail for her, but she cried. Chapter 7, I'm willing to tear myself into pieces for others to see. Fang Li squatted down and lifted the hem of her skirt, exposing the ugly scar on her ankle, which made everyone in the hall breathe a sigh of relief. But why doesn't anyone care if I'm sad? Fang Li's fingers slowly stroked the wound. It was a rainy day today and she felt a little pain, but fortunately she was used to it. I have always wondered who among you bribed those female prisoners to dare to do this to me. I have dozens of wounds of varying sizes on my body. Do you want to see them? They said it was Gu Mingzhou, but Fang Li didn't believe it. She wanted to find out who it was in front of everyone. When the daughters present saw their wound, they showed expressions of pity. Girls from families like theirs have been brought up in pampered environments since childhood. How could they have ever suffered such a pain? Is it you? Fang Li looked at Fang Fu and Sun Wanqi, and quickly turned his gaze to Fang Yuxin, or you. Finally, he glanced quickly at Gu Mingzhou's face and then withdrew his gaze coldly. When Gu Mingzhou saw Fang Li tearing open her ugly scar to show everyone, he felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. Now, seeing that she seemed to not care about him anymore, he felt a pang of sourness in his heart. For many years, Fang Li has been by his side, heartlessly. He had long been accustomed to Ali, please stop talking. At worst, I will give you the position of the eldest daughter of the Fang family. Fang Yuxin interrupted Fang Li with her trembling hands covering her head. It's my fault. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have stayed in the Fang family so shamelessly. The day I was kidnapped 3 years ago, I should have died in the wilderness. But you're suffering in prison. What does that have to do with me and my parents? Prisons are full of scum. It's your own fault that you made a mistake and were put in jail, and that's why you're bullied by them. Fang Yuxin's nose tip was slightly red, tears were swirling in her eyes, but she was strong enough not to let them fall. Mingzhou, you shouldn't have saved me in the first place. Just let me die. With just a few words, the matter of Fang Li being bullied in prison was completely brushed aside. Fang Li cast a light gaze at Fang Yuxin's face. People who really want to die won't say this word. Fang Li. Gu Mingzhou frowned, protecting Fang Yuxin behind him, patting her hand comfortingly, and then turned to Fang Li and said, I remember before I came here, I warned you to think before you speak. Do you know the consequences of your behavior today? A bitter smile flashed across Fang Li's lips. Astringent. She was in pieces, and she showed the wounds she least wanted to expose to others. In Gu Mingzhou's eyes, she was just making a fuss. Yes, I am being unreasonable, but you are my fiancé, shouldn't you stand by me unconditionally? Gu Mingzhou, what's the matter with you protecting other women in front of me now? After Fang Li's reminder, everyone finally reacted. Oh, right, isn't Yu Mingzhou Fang Li's fiancé? It seems like he has been speaking for Fang Yusin from the beginning? During the 3 years that Fang Li was away, some people had already sensed something going on. In Gu's recent external biddings, one can always see Fang's bids, and Fang Yusin is almost always responsible for them. It was normal to meet in the business world, but there were too many scenes where these two appeared together. However, because Fang Yusin and Fang Li are sisters, no one thinks about it that way. The most important thing for wealthy families is face, and everyone is a respectable person. It is impossible for them to poach someone from the sister's family. But after Fang Li's hint, everyone realized that it was possible that there was really something going on between Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yusin. Sister-in-law steals brother-in-law? Oh my god, what a weird plot. It's very melodramatic, but it also successfully aroused the gossipy hearts of the wealthy wives. There is no shortage of gossip in wealthy families, but there is a lack of fresh gossip, especially when this gossip is about the Gu and Fang families. Fang Li looked at Fang Yusin and smiled. I have the blood of the Fang family in my body. Do I need you to give up my position as the eldest lady? She curled her lips slightly, and her eyes were filled with twinkling lights. The emotions that had been pent up for a long time suddenly burst out. Fang Li walked to the decanter and picked up the container with his slender finger bones. You said I drugged you, right? She picked up the bottle and gulped down a big gulp. Okay, I gave myself the medicine. Are you satisfied? The fishy and spicy taste instantly filled her entire mouth. The mouth of the bottle was too large, so the liquid inevitably spilled from the corners of her lips onto her clothes. She took 2 sips and threw the decanter in front of Fang Yusin. The sound of porcelain breaking echoed throughout the hall, and broken pieces rolled in every corner. Broken. Fang Li also shattered. Chapter 8 I'm not getting married. At this time, Fang Li's mobile phone screen lit up, but the phone was set to silent mode. 3 phone calls came in consecutively, but she didn't see them. Sun Wanqi was the first to react. When she saw Fang Li drink the wine, her face suddenly changed. What if there is poison inside and I die here? Sun Wanqi hurriedly ordered someone to call an ambulance. At this moment, a servant came out of the kitchen. I added it to the young lady's wine. She said she looked bad recently, so I added some vitamins to it. The servant and Fang Li were about 70% similar in figure, and everyone then realized that they had made a big mistake. But it's not over yet. Fang Li suddenly grabbed Fang Yusin's wrist and dragged her upstairs. Fang Li was so abnormal, like a madman, they had never seen him before. Fang Yusin originally wanted to struggle, but out of the corner of her eye, she saw Yu Mingzhou chasing after them. Her eyes flashed, and she obediently followed Fang Li. What are you doing? Fang Li, you are going crazy, don't take Yu Xin with you. Let go. Yu Mingzhou rushed forward, pulled Fang Li away, and swept a cold gaze across her face. Suddenly, Yu Mingzhou was stunned. What did he see? Tears. Fang Li is crying? Why is she crying? Yu Mingzhou suddenly felt an inexplicable panic, but soon this panic was replaced by great shock. The 3 of them were at the entrance of a staircase. During the tug-of-war, Fang Li's body suddenly rolled down the stairs for some unknown reason. She was too light and fell down at the slightest gust of wind. In fact, at the moment she fell, Yu Mingzhou had the opportunity to catch her. However, Fang Yusin suddenly cried out in pain, and Yu Mingzhou's attention was drawn to Fang Yusin. When he turned around and tried to pull Fang Li again, it was too late. Fang Li had an injured ankle, and she couldn't stand steadily after being pushed so hard. The moment Yu Mingzhou chose to let her go and protect Fang Yusin, her heart died. The process of rolling down the stairs was very painful. Fang Li hit the metal railings several times and her head felt like it was exploding. But she bit her lips tightly and didn't make any sound. This is what she should bear. She deserves it. She is guilty of falling in love with Yu Mingzhou. Now that she had fallen, she finally woke up. People around. He was frightened to see Fang Li lying on the ground and unable to get up for a long time, so he hurriedly called an ambulance. Sun Wanqi, who was standing by, was also frightened and quickly ran to Fang Li, trying to help her up. Fang Li gently pushed it open. She took a while to relax, and until the dizziness in her head subsided a little, she got up by herself without crying or making a fuss. She stood in the hall, staggering, her head buzzing. Fang Li is a person who is very afraid of pain, but now she is silent. She had long been accustomed to this level of pain during her 3 years in prison. It was nothing and she could just endure it. Her gaze fell on Gu Mingzhou's face with a very indifferent look. Cold and distant, without a trace of warmth, nor the love that was in the past, it was like looking at a stranger. Their eyes met and Gu Mingzhou frowned. It was the first time that Fang Li showed such an indifferent expression towards him. But it doesn't matter. Fang Li was just angry because he didn't grab her in time. She'll be fine after a while. She's always been very good in this regard and never needs his coaxing. Because of the unpleasantness, the birthday party had to end hastily. After seeing off the last guest, Fang Li sniffed and tears fell before her voice. In the hall, after a brief silence, Fang Fu and Sun Wanqi finally reacted. They thought they heard it wrongly. What did you say? Fang Li pinched her palms and finally said what was in her heart with difficulty: the engagement with Gu Mingzhou is cancelled. Whoever wants to marry can marry. I think he and Fang Yusin are a good match. Let them be together. I'm withdrawing. Fang Fu frowned. Fang Li, what nonsense are you talking about? Is your brain damaged? You said you don't want to marry me, so what? Chapter 9. Fang Li, what are you doing again? Fang Fu's face darkened and he tapped his fingers on the table, making a dull sound. They all saw how much she cared about Gu Mingzhou over the years. Fang Li had finally gotten this marriage. Would she be willing to cancel it? Are you jealous of your sister? But they are just working together and have become closer. Is this worth being jealous? Sun Wanqi followed up by saying, don't you know what kind of person your sister is? She has always been good to you. Will she compete with you for Mingzhou? Fang Li looked at her parents and then at Fang Yusin. How ironic. Fang Yusin didn't even have to say a word, her parents would speak for her. Fang Li pulled her lower lip, a hint of ridicule flashing across the corner of her mouth. This is not a joke, nor is it jealousy. From now on, Gu Mingzhou and I are done with each other, and the marriage is annulled. Gu Mingzhou pulled his tie impatiently and said in a deep voice, Fang Li, what are you making a fuss about? Fang Li burst out laughing. Make a fuss? Gu Mingzhou, just because I love you, am I inferior to you? Am I guilty? Can't you see my sadness and think I'm just fooling around? I've been wanting to ask you this for a long time. You left your fiancée behind to protect another woman. Have you ever thought about what would happen to me? Also, how could you just give me to someone else so casually? You really make me sick. Gu Mingzhou was stunned for a moment, then he suddenly realized. Fang Li went crazy because she heard those words and was just mad at him. It's just a joke between friends. Is this how narrow-minded you are? He laughed sarcastically. Fang Yusin said slowly, Ali, why are you doing this? You are so willful and it will only make things difficult for your parents. If you suddenly cancel the engagement, won't it make our family a laughingstock for others? This family is a joke. I have never seen an adopted daughter trample on her own daughter like this. It's already like this, are you still afraid of being laughed at by outsiders? Fang Fu was furious and slapped Fang Li in the face. His chest was shaking violently, and he glared at her with bloodshot eyes. This is treason. Fang Li's face was hit and tilted to the side. She was already feeling dizzy from rolling down the stairs, and this slap made her see stars. Her cheeks were burning with pain, and she suppressed the soreness in her eyes. Fang Fu gritted his teeth and said, do you think that if you cancel the engagement, who would dare to marry you? Who would risk offending the Gu family and marry you regardless of everything? Besides, you being in prison is not a good thing, and the whole upper class will know about it tomorrow. You have completely disgraced our Fang family. Yes, I have been to prison, but I was framed. Just because the person who framed me was Fang Yusin, you all chose to turn a blind eye. Fang Li was very disappointed with her family and she had nothing to say to them. She had long seen through the so-called relatives and lovers. She turned and walked out. It was raining heavily outside. The gatekeeper couldn't bear to watch this and quietly handed Fang Li an umbrella. She didn't answer and turned to walk into the rain. I let myself get soaked, but I felt more relaxed than ever before. Leaving them, she felt like she had emerged from her cocoon and was reborn. Perhaps it was because the night was too dark, Fang Li did not notice that a pure black car was parked on the side of the road not far away. The man in the car was wearing a white shirt, with a cigarette slanted between his lips, a little scarlet smoke rising. When the cigarette burned out, he exhaled a puff of white mist. After a while, a man who looked like an assistant came in from outside. There was a brief silence in the small space. Assistant Chen Zhu whispered something to him, and Jiyu Zhaoting, who was sitting in the back row, narrowed his lazy eyes dangerously in an instant. That's roughly what happened. Chen Zhu also found it unbelievable. What happened in the Fang family tonight was too dramatic. The legitimate daughter was bullied by the fake daughter like that, and no one in the Fang family supported the real daughter. What's going on with this family? Is there something wrong with your brain? Chen Zhu glanced at Jiyu Zhaoting's expression, then at Fang Li's gradually disappearing figure in the distance. Do you want to follow? Jiyu Zhaoting's eyes fell on the black screen of the phone. As the screen lit up, his three-dimensional facial features became clear in the darkness. The man's jawline was tense, the light reflected on his brow bone kept changing, the cell phone rang without warning, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of Jiyu Zhaoting's lips. This time, he didn't miss her call. His finger quickly slid across the answer button on the screen. Fang Li's somewhat uncertain voice suddenly poured out, 258, is that you? Chapter 10, How will you face people if this gets out about you stealing your sister's man? Fang Li's departure made the atmosphere in the Fang family extremely weird. In the beginning, she was the one who insisted on getting engaged to Gu Mingzhou, but now she suddenly said she didn't want to get married. The Fang family members looked at each other in bewilderment. No one expected that Fang Li, who was always easy to talk to, didn't even look at Gu Mingzhou when she left. Fang Yusin broke the silence. Mom and Dad, calm down. Our Li is still young and naive. She suffered in prison. She just couldn't figure it out at the moment, so she contradicted you. 24 is still young. Fang Fu slammed the table in anger. You are so old, and you speak without thinking about the consequences. Can she cancel the engagement just like that? If it is really cancelled, wouldn't it really prove that you and Mingzhou are not innocent? You don't know how to be considerate of others at all. Fang Yusin lowered her head, her eyes red. As long as my sister is happy, it doesn't matter if I feel a little wronged. It's just a bad name, I can bear it at most. Seeing her eldest daughter like this, Sun Wanqi rubbed her shoulders distressedly. A girl's reputation is important. If you steal your sister's man, how can you face people if the news gets out? Fang Yusin pursed her lips and clasped her hands in front of her. But his eyes glanced at Gu Mingzhou, who was sitting on the sofa without saying a word. He sat on the sofa, holding a cigarette between his bony fingers, his brows slightly furrowed. The smoke made the stern face look hard to see clearly. He is so abnormal. Fang Yusin felt a little uneasy and was about to go forward to coax him with a coquettish look, when she saw Gu Mingzhou put out his cigarette and stood up. I'm leaving. Fang Fu and Sun Wanqi looked at each other and quickly winked at Fang Yusin. Fang Yusin nodded, followed behind Gu Mingzhou and said, It's raining outside, let me take you there. As soon as the two of them left, Fang Fu was worried. Do you think Gu Mingzhou will be irritated and break off the engagement with our family? His face was dark when he left just now. The Gu family is one of the richest families in the world, and many people are trying their best to get in touch with them. Gu Mingzhou is the prince of the Gu family, and he was asked to break off the engagement by a woman in public. Isn't this a slap in his face? Sun Wanqi sighed. Arlie is too willful, but hasn't she been willful enough in these years? Don't worry, it's normal for young people to quarrel. In a few days, when she has thought it through, she will take the initiative to apologize to Gu Mingzhou. Fang Fu thought about it and felt that what his wife said made sense. Yes, they have all seen Fang Li's feelings for Gu Mingzhou over the years. In prison, I still remember. A letter is sent to Gu Mingzhou every week. They have been childhood sweethearts for 7 years. How can their relationship be broken up just like that? She couldn't really want to break off the engagement, she was just angry. Fang Yusin walked Gu Mingzhou out the door and helped him straighten his tie. Halfway through sorting, she suddenly thought of something and started to cry out of grievance. It's my fault. I made Ali misunderstand me again. Fang Yusin lowered her head, covered her face with one hand, and tears fell straight down her cheeks. I've already told her that I won't snatch you from her, but why is she still making trouble with you? She is so spoiled and willful that she made you lose face in public, Mingzhou. It's all my fault. Gu Mingzhou saw Fang Yusin crying sadly, took out a tissue to wipe her tears. Don't cry for her, she doesn't deserve it. Fang Yusin pursed her lips, trying her best to suppress her emotions. Don't be like this. This is the front door of the Fang family, what if we are seen? Ming, I said, As long as I can watch you from a distance, that's enough. I am not worthy of walking with you. Gu Mingzhou subconsciously reached for another cigarette. Thinking of how Fang Li was covered in thorns just now, he felt that Fang Yuxin in front of him was more gentle and generous. But the Gu family is a top wealthy family and will not allow women of unknown origin to enter. But Fang Yuxin's biological parents are unknown. His heart softened and he kissed Fang Yuxin's hair. Yuxin, believe me, I won't let you suffer these grievances in vain. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Mingzhou caught a glimpse of a black car parked not far away. My heart sank. Gu Mingzhou immediately let go of Fang Yuxin reflexively and took 2 steps forward. Is it my uncle Gu Zhaoting? Chapter 11. You are deliberately doing this just to attract my attention? Because of the rain, the vision was blurred and Gu Mingzhou couldn't see the license plate clearly, and the car drove away. Fang Yuxin came over at this time. Mingzhou, what's wrong? Only then did Gu Mingzhou look away. Fang Yuxin held the umbrella in her slender hands. Worried that he would get wet, she held the umbrella above his head, while Fang Yuxin herself was soaked in the rain. At a certain moment, Gu Mingzhou seemed to see the shadow of Fang Li in Fang Yuxin. Fang Li seemed to have done this kind of stupid thing before. Gu Mingzhou shook his head. He didn't love Fang Li, so why did he suddenly miss her? Seeing Fang Yuxin shivering with cold, he took off his suit and draped it over her shoulders. Fang Yuxin whispered, Fang Li was so determined when she left the Fang family. Could it be that she really wanted to break off the engagement with you? How is that possible? Gu Mingzhou hugged Fang Yuxin's shoulders and said, as long as she is still Fang Li, she will never leave me. Isn't she trying so hard to attract my attention? But she seems really angry tonight. Fang Yuxin pursed her lips. How about giving her a call and asking her where she went? Gu Mingzhou waved his hands and said nonchalantly, what's there to fight about? When she figures it out, she will take the initiative to apologize to me. Gu Mingzhou never took the initiative to call Fang Li. Between them, Fang Li has always been the one who takes the initiative. No matter who is right or wrong, she is always the one who apologizes. For such trivial matters, Fang Li would be angry for a day or two, and then she would take the initiative to make peace with him. Gu Mingzhou had long been accustomed to it. The weather was heavy and gloomy. There was a heavy thunderstorm outside the window, and the sky seemed to be torn into a huge hole. Chen Zhu looked at the unconscious woman lying on the bed and whispered, Miss Fang has a concussion. The doctor said she may need to stay in the hospital for 2 more days for observation. Gu Zhaoting's jaw was tight. He didn't respond. His eyes fell on Fang Li's ankle. Chen Zhu took a quick look, lowered his head, and relayed the doctor's words, this is a wound caused by a porcelain fragment. The treatment was too late. The scar may not be removed, but the bone should be fine. Gu Zhaoting's thin lips were pursed, and his deep eyes showed no emotion, but it was not difficult to feel the cold aura emanating from him. The girl lying on the bed looked too disheveled. Although her wet clothes had been changed, her overly thin body made her lack the vitality that a young girl should have. There was a slap on her face, which looked so abrupt on her overly fair face. It must hurt. Gu Zhaoting took out a cigarette from his pocket, bit it at his lips, and was about to light it. Afraid of choking Fang Li, he put out the cigarette. Mr. Pei is still waiting for you. Chen Zhu glanced at the time and reminded quietly, it's getting late. If you don't hurry over, the game will be over. Let's just go. I'm not going. Gu Zhaoting sat down beside the bed and said, I'll stay here tonight and won't go anywhere. Chen Zhu's eyes moved, and just as he was about to speak, the phone in Gu Zhaoting's pocket rang. Seeing that Fang Li was not sleeping soundly on the bed, Gu Zhaoting went to the corridor with his cell phone in hand to answer the call. Pei Jingxing's noisy voice came out from the other end, Old Gu, how can you be so arrogant? You left the scene suddenly without even saying goodbye. If someone didn't know, they would think you were seduced by some woman. Gu Zhaoting twitched his lips, well, he was seduced away by a woman, are you jealous? What big dream are you having? Pei Jingxing laughed twice and teased while holding the phone, do you really think that after serving in the army for a few years, the country will give you a wife? Lao Jiu, wake up. It's raining a little hard tonight, but you can't let water get into your brain. Gu Zhaoting bit a cigarette at the corner of his lips and didn't respond. He and Pei Jingxing were childhood friends who grew up naked, otherwise this kid wouldn't dare to joke with him like this. Come here quickly, we're waiting for you. Pei Jingxing urged, "Oh, by the way, your nephew is here too." Yu Zhaoting's eyes suddenly narrowed dangerously. Yu Mingzhou. Yes, what happened to the Fang family tonight has spread throughout the circle. Your nephew has a good mental state. Even in such a situation, he still has the leisure to come and drink. A dark shadow rolled in Yu Zhaoting's eyes. He curled his lips, but there was no smile in his eyes. Instead, they were terribly cold. Wait, I'll be there soon. Chapter 12. I want to see you. Not long after Yu Zhaoting left, Fang Li opened her eyes in a daze. The air was filled with the smell of disinfectant, and everything in sight was white, so she was in the hospital. After Fang Li left Fang's house, it was raining heavily. In a dim state, she saw the missed call on her phone and called back. As soon as he told the other party the address, his head felt heavy and he passed out. So, that person was the one who brought her to the hospital. 10 years ago, she accidentally saved a man. In return, the man gave her a jade pendant and a phone number. He said that she had done him a favor and if she needed help in the future, she could call this number. Fang Li wrote down the string of numbers with some doubt, but she didn't expect that tonight, by some chance, they would come in handy. She originally thought that more than 10 years had passed and the other party might have forgotten about it. She was just trying it out without much hope, but the call actually went through. Fang Li couldn't even remember what he looked like. She only remembered that he was a young man wearing a police uniform with the number 258 on his shoulder. It should be his code name. Just as I was immersed in my memories, the door of the ward suddenly opened from outside. A man in a suit pushed the door open. Fang Li was startled and subconsciously turned her head to look. The man was tall and handsome, and Fang Li couldn't help but stare at him for a few more seconds. Chen Zhu didn't expect Fang Li to wake up so quickly, and hurriedly said, "Miss Fang, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Wait a moment, I'll call the doctor to take a look." After a lot of trouble, a group of people came into the ward and left in a large group. Fang Li looked at the medical staff coming in and out and felt something was unreal. There was a feeling that someone cared about her. After the nurse left, Fang Li looked at Chen Zhu and asked, 258. Thank you so much for tonight. That memory was too long ago. Fang Li was only 14 years old at that time. Now 10 years have passed, that person's appearance has long been blurred in her mind. Chen Zhu was stunned, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He didn't know what the string of numbers Fang Li mentioned meant, but he guessed it should be related to Yu Zhaoting. Chen Zhu didn't dare to speak carelessly. "Miss Fang, are you looking for someone to save you?" He left first because of something. "My name is Chen Zhu. If you need anything, you can ask me to do it." Turns out, it wasn't him. Fang Li nodded. Chen Zhu looked. She seemed a little tired, so she closed the door and went out quietly. Arriving at the corridor, Chen Zhu immediately sent a message to Yu Zhaoting, "Mr. Yu, Miss Fang has woken up, and the doctor said she is in good condition." Yu Zhaoting replied immediately, "Okay." After posting it, Chen Zhu thought of something and edited another one, "Ms. Fang may want to see you." Yu Zhaoting, who had just received the news, arrived at the club. It was raining heavily outside, and the man was walking in the wind, but his clothes were not wet at all. He lowered his head to look at his phone, his tall nose bridge shone with a layer of light from the screen. When he saw the words, "Want to see you," Yu Zhaoting raised his eyebrows. There was a wildness about him, and the light shone diagonally on him, making his figure look particularly tall. Those deep eyes seemed to be smiling. Yu Zhaoting bit a cigarette at the corner of his lips and typed, "I will rush back as soon as possible." As soon as the message was sent, Yu Zhaoting put away the smile on his face. In the private club box, with the sudden appearance of Yu Zhaoting, the people who had been surrounding Gu Mingzhou to curry his favor all ran to Yu Zhaoting. If Gu Mingzhou is the prince of the Beijing Circle, then Yu Zhaoting is the emperor of the Beijing Circle. Everyone present knew that Yu Zhaoting held real power and was the head of Universal Group. Gu Mingzhou touched his nose awkwardly. He was so pretentious just now, but now he took the initiative to walk over and say hello, uncle. Chapter 13, What will happen to you if you anger your uncle? Yu Zhaoting ignored him, reached out to take the wine handed to him by Pei Jingxing, held it between his fingers, and swayed it casually. In the goblet, the dark red liquid reflected a strange light. Gu Mingzhou thought about the purpose of his trip and said with gritted teeth, "Uncle, the project of Yaoxin Group. Guan Yu recently has a project up for bidding, and Yao Xin Group is one of the bidding companies. Gu Mingzhou promised Fang Yusin that he would give her the project. But when it came to the final signing, it was stuck with my uncle Gu Zhaoting. The contract has been sent to the president's office for half a month, but it has not been processed yet. Otherwise, Gu Mingzhou would not have rushed here in such a heavy rain. Gu Zhaoting opened his eyelids and glanced at Gu Mingzhou coldly. This is a private place, don't talk about business. Gu Mingzhou had prepared a lot of words, but because of Gu Zhaoting's words, let's not talk about business, they were stuck in his stomach. But thinking of Fang Yusin's request, he had to shamelessly say, "Uncle, it's just a matter of signing, you." Bang! Halfway through his words, Gu Zhaoting placed the wine glass in his hand on the table. No one expected that the glass would suddenly break into pieces. Gu Mingzhou, you have really become more capable. Gu Zhaoting's pupils were dark and his eyes were sharp. Although he didn't speak very loudly, the place suddenly became quiet. Gu Mingzhou had a bad feeling in his heart. He didn't have much contact with his uncle, and they didn't have any conflicts of interest on weekdays. Why did he feel that his uncle seemed to be very angry with him tonight? Gu Mingzhou, don't forget that you are from Huanyu. Have you reviewed Yexing's qualifications? How dare you bring something to me for signature? Gu Mingzhou argued, I have reviewed it, and there is nothing wrong with Yao Xin. Okay, then answer me, why did you give the chance to Yao Xin when there are obviously better options? Gu Mingzhou was stunned and couldn't answer. It's not convenient to say, right? Then I'll help you answer it, because someone from Yao Xin has entrusted you. Do you need me to tell you in public who that person is? Gu Mingzhou had an ugly look on his face. The people present tonight were all second-generation rich people in the circle. Many of them were familiar with him and always tried to cling to him. Gu Zhaoting's few words seemed to be a chat with him about business, but in fact he was suppressing him in every way, making Gu Mingzhou lose all face. How can he continue to mingle among this group of people in the future? Pei Jingxing on the side understood something. He said while eating melon seeds. Gu Mingzhou, you are begging your uncle for your confidant. No wonder Fang Li wants to break off the engagement with you. You are openly having an affair with your mistress. Who can tolerate this? When the word broken engagement was mentioned, Gu Mingzhou's face turned dark. He argued with a gloomy face, Yu Xin is not a mistress. Gu Zhaoting sneered, secretly having an affair, what else could it be but a mistress? Gu Mingzhou choked and couldn't utter a word for a long time. He realized later that Gu Zhaoting was so angry tonight. Could it be that he heard about what happened to him in the Fang family? However, my uncle never likes to meddle in these trivial matters. What happened? Gu Mingzhou thought about it and felt that it might be because it involved the dignity of the Gu family. Fang Li proposed to cancel the engagement in public. If the news got out, it would damage the reputation of the Gu family. As the head of the Gu family, the uncle must of course take this into consideration. Gu Mingzhou calmed down and realized that he would gain nothing by confronting Gu Zhaoting. Fang Li said she wanted to cancel the engagement tonight, but it was just out of anger. She will come to me and make peace in a couple of days. Gu Zhaoting took out a cigarette from the cigarette box and bit it, his eyes narrowed slightly, really? Gu Zhaoting's, is that so, was asked with deep meaning. Gu Mingzhou didn't understand the deep meaning and nodded. It's just a quarrel between young lovers. It's no big deal. Uncle, you are busy with all kinds of things. Don't worry about such trivial matters. Wait for Fang Li to apologize to me, and the face lost by the Gu family will be restored. Hearing this, Gu Zhaoting suddenly fell silent. This reminded him. Yes, Fang Li did take the initiative to propose to Gu Mingzhou tonight to break off the engagement. But what if she regrets it? Can she really give up 7 years of relationship so easily? Gu Zhaoting bit the cigarette and inhaled slowly, with a layer of hostility lingering around him. After finishing his cigarette, he spoke. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, bring Fang Yusin here. Gu Mingzhou was stunned, not knowing why Gu Zhaoting suddenly asked to meet Fang Yusin. He was worried that his uncle would embarrass her, so he immediately said, this is between Fang Li and me, and has nothing to do with Yu Xin. Pei Jingxing finished a handful of melon seeds and made a sharp comment. The governor has become like this, and it has nothing to do with her. If I asked you to bring her, you should have brought her here obediently. If you anger your uncle, what good will you get? Chapter 14 Help, it's so shameful. Gu Mingzhou came to Gu Zhaoting to sign, but in the end, he didn't sign anything and instead lost all his dignity and face. In the end, he couldn't sit still anymore and left in despair. Pei Jingxing was holding a glass of wine in his hand. He noticed something and said meaningfully, "Old Gu, something is wrong with you tonight." Gu Zhaoting smiled and asked, "What's wrong?" Pei Jingxing saw through it but didn't say anything. "You know it in your heart." After finishing the work, Gu Zhaoting didn't plan to stay here any longer. "Let's go." Pei Jingxing was curious. "You left so early, what kind of woman could seduce you like this?" "You don't understand." Gu Zhaoting took the cigarette but from his lips and stubbed it out. "I can even give her my life." TSK, I didn't expect you to be such a romantic." Pei Jingxing crossed his arms, with an ambiguous smile on his face. He moved closer to Gu Zhaoting and lowered his voice. "Is it her? The one who saved you 10 years ago, Fang Li?" Gu Zhaoting said nothing, his dark eyes swept across Pei Jingxing's face. Pei Jingxing understood, and silently applauded himself for his cleverness and wit, but couldn't help but tease him. "What's the point of having a crush on her? When you were a police officer at the border, she was chasing after your nephew for 7 years. If Gu Mingzhou hadn't been blind, they might have been married a long time ago." Pei Jingxing offered a very enthusiastic suggestion. "If I were you, I would take advantage of her quarrel with your nephew, and coax her into getting married while she is still angry and has not yet reacted. Then she will be unable to regret it." Gu Zhaoting seemed not to hear what he said and walked out the door. After walking 2 steps, Gu Zhaoting thought of something and turned back. "Where's Song Yu?" "I'm staying at home, what's wrong?" "Go home and ask her to go to the hospital to accompany Fang Li tomorrow. I'll send you the address of the ward later." As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Zhaoting left without looking back. Pei Jingxing realized belatedly that he had become a tool. "Song Yu and I were arguing, why should I go home? Otherwise, why do you think I set up this situation when it was raining so hard? It's because it's hard to go home and I need my brothers to accompany me and relieve my boredom." Pei Jingxing took a sip of wine, and his head was heavy when he thought of Song Yu. It was pouring rain the night before, but the rain stopped as soon as the sky brightened. Fang Li slept soundly. She felt like she had a dream last night, but she couldn't remember it for a while. "Woke up. When I was half asleep, a man's voice suddenly came from behind me." Fang Li was stunned. "Male?" She immediately looked back in the direction where the sound came from, and her whole body was numb. On the other side of the bed, there was a strange man lying. He was half leaning against the head of the bed, staring at her leisurely with his beautiful eyes. The man's white shirt was a little wrinkled, with 3 buttons undone, and the muscle texture on his chest was faintly visible. Fang Li frowned. What was going on? Gu Zhaoting lowered his eyes slightly, and raised his thin lips. "You are so surprised, Miss Fang, you must have forgotten how I got on this bed last night, right?" Fang Li subconsciously tightened her fingers that were gripping the quilt, and looked at Gu Zhaoting with a wary look. She didn't even know him, but how come he was in her bed? Gu Zhaoting said seriously, straightening his shirt as he spoke, "You fell asleep last night and wouldn't let me leave. You took advantage of me, so I should be the one who is angry." Fang Li was stunned. She held someone back last night and wouldn't he let him leave? Fang Li closed her eyes and recalled that after the doctor saw her last night, she lay down on the bed and fell asleep. She seemed to have had a dream in a daze. Fang Li couldn't remember what she dreamed about exactly. She only vaguely remembered that she seemed to be wrapped in a warm embrace for the whole night. Fang Li looked up at the man in front of her again and asked doubtfully, "Are you sure I took the initiative to pull you?" Gu Zhaoting didn't say anything. He raised his hand and began to straighten his shirt. When he was tidying up the 3rd button, Gu Zhaoting suddenly paused. He raised his narrow eyes and his gaze fell on Fang Li's right palm. Fang Li followed Gu Zhaoting's gaze, and then she saw the 3rd button tightly held in her palm. Was he pulled down by her? Fang Li. Help, so shameful. But she really couldn't remember anything. Chapter 15, Flash Marriage. Fang Li lowered her head, bit her lips tightly, and secretly looked at his expression. She should have just held onto the other person and not let him leave, lying on the bed all night, right? But why did this man appear in her ward? Fang Li raised her eyes and asked tentatively, "Are you 258? Gu Zhaoting raised his eyebrows, sat down on the chair, crossed his long legs in trousers, and looked at her with a smile in his deep eyes. Yes, it's me. His voice was clear and cold, with the hoarseness that was unique to the early morning. Ms. Fang, you are not going to use your life-saving grace to offset the offense you caused me last night, are you? When their eyes met, Fang Li was a little dazed. 10 years ago, when she rescued him, he was lying behind a haystack, covered in mud, with a horrific wound on his heart. She didn't expect that when she met him again 10 years later, he would become so handsome and extraordinary. Fang Li had always thought that Gu Mingzhou was the most handsome man in Beijing, but even though she had a filter for him, she had to admit at this moment that he was far inferior to the man in front of her. He is elegant and handsome, tall and steady, which makes people feel at ease. Fang Li's fingertips trembled, and she asked softly, I guess nothing happened to us, right? Gu Zhaoting looked at her with a smile on his face. What do you think? The quilt under Fang Li's palm was crumpled. She felt conflicted and unsure whether she had done anything more excessive besides pulling off the buttons. Invisible pressure came. Fang Li felt that if she didn't express her opinion, it would be a bit unreasonable. I'll buy you a new shirt to compensate you, is that okay? Gu Zhaoting's smile deepened. Compensate for my clothes. Fang Li pursed her lips. It seems that it is indeed not enough for him. He looks either rich or noble, so he should not be short of 1 or 2 pieces of clothing. Fang Li couldn't think of anything to give him for the moment. The key point was that she had just come out of the Fang family and had nothing. After 2 seconds of silence, Fang Li said softly, if you have any requests, just tell me. If I can do it, I will definitely marry. She was halfway through her words when she was suddenly interrupted by the other party. Fang Li was unable to react for a moment. You? What did you say? Gu Zhaoting leaned back in his chair, his eyes falling on Fang Li's red lips. Her lips are small, rosy and vivid. Gu Zhaoting's Adam's apple rolled slightly for a moment. I said, you can consider getting married. The man's tone was casual, as if he was discussing with her what to eat later. But Fang Li's heart felt as if it was swept by a huge wave. She froze. We've only just met once, and I don't even know your name. Gu Zhaoting put his fingers on his forehead and gently scratched his eyebrows, as if he was a little helpless. Miss Fang, you may not know that I am a conservative person. For 29 years, I have strictly adhered to male ethics. But you slept with me last night. How can I explain this to my future wife? After a pause, Gu Zhaoting leaned forward, raised his eyelids, and moved the corners of his lips slightly. Besides, we have met more than once, and have known each other for 10 years. You saved my life, so it makes sense for us to get married. Fang Li. Is it difficult to end it without getting married? You may not know this, but I have a fiancé. Fang Li pursed her lips, and then seemed to remember something. She lowered her eyes became a little lonely, but. Chapter 16, Singleness and Abstinence are Good for Health. Fang Li was silent for a moment, then said, last night, we broke off our engagement. Gu Zhaoting's black hair was blown by the wind and his eyes were deep. Just as he opened his mouth, there was a knock on the ward door from outside. A young nurse poked her head in, holding a thermometer. Gu Zhaoting stood up and tightened the tie around his neck. When you have considered our marriage, let Chen Zhu tell me anytime. As he spoke, he took the cup, walked to the water dispenser, poured a cup of warm water, and placed it at the head of Fang Li's bed. You should take good care of yourself first, I will come to see you again. After watching Gu Zhaoting's tall and straight figure leave, Fang Li calmed down. She couldn't help but think of Gu Mingzhou again. How did he change his heart? I especially remember the first 2 years after returning to the Fang family. Because Fang Li felt like vomiting whenever she smelled gasoline, Fang Yuxin often took the bus while she walked on the way home from school. Occasionally when she looked back, Fang Li saw Gu Mingzhou following behind her. Wearing a custom-made school uniform, with his hands in his pockets, he looked sullen. Fang Li deliberately stopped and waited for 2 minutes. Gu Mingzhou was tall and had long legs, so he quickly caught up. He was much taller than Fang Li and had a cold expression on his face, but when he lowered his eyes to look at her, he couldn't hide his love for her. At that time, Gu Mingzhou should have had her in his heart, right? Later, at the centenary celebration of the school. As a class representative, Fang Yuxin was going to play the piano on stage, and her partner happened to be Gu Mingzhou. Before going on stage, Fang Yuxin's hand was inexplicably injured. She cried and said to Gu Mingzhou, "It's all my fault," feeling aggrieved and pitiful. The aristocratic school was invested and opened by the Gu family. As the school board members, the Gu family would naturally send someone to attend such a grand banquet as the centenary celebration. Gu Mingzhou's mother also wanted her son to show up at the school anniversary to show that their Gu family's eldest branch was full of talented people. But who would have thought that the carefully prepared program would eventually be ruined by a partner? Gu Mingzhou asked Fang Yuxin how she was injured. Fang Yuxin shed tears, shook her head and looked at Fang Li, refusing to say anything. After his repeated questioning, Fang Yuxin finally said that it was Fang Li who hit her with a brick. Fang Li was only 18 years old. Because of Fang Yuxin's words, she was slapped in public by Gu Mingzhou. "Brother Mingzhou, why did you hit our Li?" Fang Yuxin rushed over and protected Fang Li behind her. "She is my sister, I don't blame her." Recalling the past, Fang Li wanted to laugh. There are so many things like this, so many that Fang Li is overwhelmed. Too many to count. She has been numbing herself all these years. She kept telling herself that it was all because of Fang Yuxin's interference that caused her and Gu Mingzhou to drift apart. But she forgot that it takes two hands to clap. In addition to Fang Yuxin's framing and her parents' tacit approval, Gu Mingzhou's indulgence of Fang Yuxin was also a crucial factor in sending her to prison 3 years ago. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Fang Li wiped the corners of her eyes subconsciously. Chen Zhu came in with a breakfast and noticed that Fang Li's eyes were red. He glanced at her without exposing her. After putting down the breakfast, he said softly, "Miss Fang, forgive me for being blunt, but tears should be saved for those who deserve it." Fang Li was startled, her pale face showing a bit of fragility. She nodded, "I understand. Thank you." "You're welcome." Chen Zhu looked at Fang Li and hesitated. "The doctor said that you can be discharged from the hospital tomorrow. Miss Fang, do you have anywhere to go?" Fang Li pursed her lips and lowered her head to stir the millet porridge in the bowl with a spoon. She didn't want to go back to the Fang family, and the Fang family might not welcome her. But if she doesn't go back, it means she has nowhere to go. Chen Zhu seemed to see Fang Li's embarrassment and whispered, "If Miss Fang is homeless, you might consider marrying my boss." Fang Li was stunned. "Your boss?" Chen Zhu nodded slightly. "My boss is 29 years old and still single. He has never had a girlfriend. He is clean and in good health. If you marry him, you don't have to worry about him messing around outside, and you don't have to worry about having no place to live, because he has nothing but a lot of houses." Seeing Fang Li was stunned and didn't say anything, Chen Zhu continued, "If I'm not mistaken, Miss Fang, you should have just been hurt by love, right? As the saying goes, the old doesn't go away before the new comes. You don't have to be trapped by the old love anymore when you start a new life. Why not do it?" Fang Li clenched her fingers, then released them. She also understands the principle of destruction before construction, but isn't it a bit too hasty to get married quickly, especially with a stranger whom she has only met twice? At this time, there was another knock on the door. Chapter 17. When they meet again, Gu Mingzhou has to call her aunt. Fang Li and Chen Zhu turned their heads to look at the same time. "It's Songyu, Fang Li's best friend." "You idiot. How could you hurt yourself like this?" Songyu heard everything that happened last night. She was so angry at home that she wanted to go to the hospital to find Fang Li that night, but she was worried that it would be too late and affect her rest. Songyu's eyes were red, and she felt a little disappointed. "He has treated you like this, you don't want to marry him?" Fang Li lowered her eyes and said resolutely, "I won't marry." When she was most helpless, Gu Mingzhou gave her a glimmer of hope. Like a beam of light, it illuminated her. So much so that over the years, she always looked at Mingzhou through a filter. Even though Gu Mingzhou hurt her repeatedly, as long as Fang Li remembered his open black and white school uniform outside the bathroom that day, the snow flying behind him, and the scarf he threw at her, she would convince herself to forgive him. Tolerate and compromise again and again. But Fang Li forgot that people will change. This light can also be transferred to illuminate others. Songyu heaved a sigh of relief. "I'm glad you can figure it out. You were just too obsessed in the past." Songyu gently stroked the scar on Fang Li's ankle and blamed herself. "I'm sorry, Ali, I'm not able to protect you." Fang Li shook her head. During that period, the Song family was in a mess, and Songyu accidentally broke her leg during a performance. She can't even take care of herself, how can I help her? The two were so engrossed in their conversation that Chen Zhu quietly closed the door and left. He came to the parking lot and saw Yu Jiaoting sitting in the car smoking. Seeing Chen Zhu coming over, Yu Jiaoting raised his eyebrows and asked, "How is it?" Ms. Fang is very surprised. "Probably, she has no plans to get married with you quickly." Chen Zhu told the truth. Yu Jiaoting stretched out his long legs, leaned lightly on the seat cushion, and chuckled, "I guessed it." Given Fang Li's personality, it would be difficult for her to agree to a quick marriage with him without any external force. As for this external force, Yu Jiaoting's eyes deepened. He stretched out his arm and casually placed it on the car window, with a thin layer of light smoke rising between his fingers. Chen Zhu sat in the driver's seat and carefully glanced at Yu Jiaoting's face before speaking. "In my opinion, boss, you might as well confess your identity to Miss Fang directly." Yu Jiaoting raised his chin, motioning for him to continue. "Just tell Miss Fang directly. How cool is this? Gu Mingzhou will even have to call her aunt when they meet in the future. Her status alone puts Gu Mingzhou under great pressure and makes him unable to reach her level again. From now on, no matter if it's the Fang family or anyone else, no one can bully her anymore. No matter how tempting it is, if I were a woman, I would." Chen Zhu became more and more excited as he spoke, and he almost spoke out of turn. He gently brushed his lips with the back of his hand and swallowed the rest of his words. Yu Jiaoting heard this and curled his lips slightly. "It's a good idea." Chen Zhu smiled and touched the back of his head. But soon, Yu Jiaoting changed the subject. "But, you don't know her." Chen Zhu blinked innocently. "Huh. Fang Li's personality is such that she is used to being suppressed in the Fang family for a long time. If I suddenly reveal my identity, I'm afraid she will be scared away." Yu Jiaoting didn't dare to take the risk. He played with the lighter in his hand, and a little smoke rose, blurring the expression on his face. At 8 o'clock in the evening, outside the private club, Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin got out of the car. Fang Yuxin was inexplicably nervous. She placed her hands in front of her and rubbed them back and forth nervously. Originally, not many people knew that she and Gu Mingzhou were together. However, after the commotion at the birthday party last night, she seemed to have been exposed. Fang Yuxin was a little scared. The Gu family is wealthy and powerful, and many people are trying their best to get in touch with them. She was afraid that Yu Jiaoting asked to see her in order to get her to leave Gu Mingzhou. After all, she was a fake daughter of unknown origin and was not worthy of a noble family like the Gu family. Fang Yuxin had heard a little about her uncle Yu Jiaoting's methods. "I heard that he had been in the police academy for 10 years, and he was full of hostility and never smiled in front of others. A year ago, Yu Jiaoting returned from the police academy. After he took over the Universal Group, he single-handedly made the other 3 branches of the Gu family become peripheral figures in the group, and the real power was firmly in his hands. Such a person's skills are evident. The Gu family is a wealthy and powerful family and they hate scandals the most. If Gu Jiaoting really wanted to clean up the family tradition and let her leave Gu Mingzhou, I'm afraid Gu Mingzhou would not dare to go against his wishes." The more Fang Yuxin thought about it, the more disappointed she felt. By then, she would be abandoned. Thinking of this, Fang Yuxin gently pulled Gu Mingzhou's sleeve, her eyes misty. "Mingzhou, I'm a little afraid. What if your uncle wants to separate us?" Gu Mingzhou patted Fang Yuxin's shoulder soothingly and said softly, "Don't worry, I won't leave you." Fang Yuxin's tears were accumulating in her eyes, and she looked pitiful as if she was about to fall. "Really?" Gu Mingzhou's heart melted. He grabbed her hand and whispered, "Whatever my uncle says later, just go along with him. Once he calms down, everything should be fine. That incident last night was quite a big deal." Gu Mingzhou guessed that his uncle asked him and Fang Yuxin to come over to warn them. "At most you'll get a scolding." Fang Yuxin nodded obediently. Gu Mingzhou remembered something and asked, "Fang Li hasn't gone back yet?" In the past, it would only take one night at most. Fang Li would take the initiative to find him and bow to him. But it's been a day, and is still very tough this time. Fang Yuxin's expression froze. She felt unhappy when she heard Gu Mingzhou mention Fang Li, but she didn't show any sign on her face. "She hasn't replied yet." She tilted her head to look at Gu Mingzhou, bit her red lips, and added, "Maybe she's still mad at me. I'll ask her to come back when this is over. Please." Yu Mingzhou sneered when he heard this word. Give her face. It's up to her to return it or not. Fang Yusin gently curled the corners of her lips at an angle that Yu Mingzhou couldn't see. She held his arm, an unknown light flashing in her eyes. Ali is really irritable this time. She will come to you later. Don't make things difficult for her. Yu Mingzhou snorted coldly. Look at her performance. She is obviously reluctant to let me go, but she still threatens me with the engagement. She takes herself too seriously. He was certain that Fang Li would take the initiative to admit her mistake to him tonight at the latest. Chapter 18, Mistress. There were 2 bodyguards guarding the entrance of the club. Yu Mingzhou wanted to take Fang Yusin in, but the bodyguard waved his hand and blocked the 2 of them with his arm. Seeing this, Yu Mingzhou's face turned cold, and he looked at the bodyguard with a hint of hostility. My uncle asked me to come here, what do you mean? The bodyguard was about 1.9 meters tall and spoke in a cold tone. I need to go in and report. Yu Mingzhou was unhappy and was about to lose his temper when Fang Yusin beside him gently pulled his sleeve. Guessing that Yu Zhaoting was deliberately trying to embarrass her, Fang Yusin looked up and smiled sweetly at the bodyguard. Forget about me waiting here. Can Mingzhou go in first? The temperature has dropped sharply since it rained last night. It was cool at night, and the draft in the club was biting. In order to look good, Fang Yusin wore a satin skirt, but the cool breeze made it look like she was wearing nothing at all, and she got so cold that the tip of her nose turned red. The bodyguard was a straight man, and he didn't buy into Fang Yusin's tricks at all. He rejected her flatly. No. Yu Mingzhou's face turned black. But the bodyguard turned around and went into the box, and he had no place to vent his anger. The 2 of them stayed outside in the cool breeze for more than 10 minutes before the bodyguard came out. Okay, go in. Yu Mingzhou stepped forward and glared at the bodyguard as a warning. The other person didn't even look at him. When beating a dog, you have to look at its owner first. Yu Mingzhou didn't bother with him. In the box, Yu Zhaoting and Pei Jingxing and a few others were playing cards. When she saw him leading Fang Yusin over, she didn't even raise her eyelids. Uncle, Yu Mingzhou took the initiative to greet him. I brought Yu Xin here. Pei Jingxing just happened to win the game and shouted excitedly, drowning out his voice. Yu Mingzhou frowned. He was already feeling angry, and now it added fuel to the fire. Fang Yusin held his sleeves tightly, signaling him not to act rashly. Another round ended, and 20 minutes had passed since they entered the door. Yu Mingzhou took advantage of the opportunity to say, Uncle, if you have any dissatisfaction, come to me, don't embarrass Yu Xin. Before Yu Zhaoting could say anything, Pei Jingxing's teasing voice came over. TSK, he's quite protective of her. Sure enough, there's an affair going on. Fang Yusin looked unhappy. But she knew that Yu Zhaoting and Pei Jingxing had always been close. Even if this is removed, the Pei family is not something that a fake daughter like her can afford to offend. Yu Zhaoting leaned back on the sofa, and Pei Jingxing understood and threw away the cards in his hand. Stood up and put his arms on Yu Mingzhou's shoulders. Mingzhou, I heard that you have stored some good wine here. Come on, take me to have a look. This was obviously an attempt to get Yu Mingzhou away. Yu Mingzhou was unwilling to do so. He was afraid that if he left Fang Yusin here alone, her uncle would make things difficult for her. He said to Pei Jingxing, Mr. Pei, how about this? I'll have someone bring the wine and we can drink it here. Is that okay? Pei Jingxing touched his cheek with the tip of his tongue and glanced at Yu Zhaoting on the sofa. Okay. He sat down on the sofa and pointed a finger in Fang Yusin's direction. Then let this mistress pour it for me. Yu Mingzhou, Mr. Pei. Be careful with your words. There were other people in the box, and when they saw this, they all looked over here to watch the show. Fang Yusin's nails turned white from pinching each other, but she still had to put on a decent smile on her face. She has to endure it. Seeing the atmosphere reaching a deadlock, Yu Zhaoting suddenly said in a cold voice, if you want to drink, go over there. Fang Yusin, stay. Yu Zhaoting wants her to stay alone. Fang Yusin was stunned and immediately looked at Yu Mingzhou for help. Since Yu Zhaoting had spoken personally, Yu Mingzhou didn't dare to say anything more. Besides, they were all in the same box, so he could see anything that happened. But seeing Fang Yusin's red eyes, Yu Mingzhou softened his heart again. Uncle, what do you want to talk about? How about I listen for a while? Yu Zhaoting then raised his eyes and half closed them. Let's talk about the Yaoxing project. Why? When will it be your turn to speak in the Gu family? Chapter 19, Get Out. Gu Mingzhou had a sullen face, but after looking around, he realized it was not his turn to get angry. Yu Xin, you chat with my uncle first. I'll be drinking next to you. Come find me when you're done. Fang Li nodded. The project has been stuck with Gu Zhaoting for more than half a month, and she is worried about how to get him to sign. Since Gu Zhaoting took the initiative to mention it, Fang Li certainly didn't want to miss this opportunity. As soon as she graduated, Fang Fu arranged for her to join the company as a project manager. But even with Fang Fu's support, it was useless in front of that group of old foxes. If she wants to gain a firm foothold, she can only convince others with her performance. Fang Li took 2 steps towards Gu Zhaoting, thinking about how to start the conversation. Uncle, that project. Gu Zhaoting raised his eyebrows coldly. What did you call me? Fang Li was startled, then she said the wrong thing. Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu. The project can be given to Yaoshen. Gu Zhaoting tapped out a cigarette from the cigarette box and said, the condition is that you leave Gu Mingzhou. Fang Li's expression suddenly changed when she heard this. Abandoning Gu Mingzhou for the project. Gu Mingzhou would hate her to death when he knew about it. But if she lost this project, how could she explain this to the company and Fang Fu? At this time, no matter what Fang Li said, it was wrong. She bit her lip and was in a dilemma. Seeing what she was thinking, Gu Zhaoting raised a hint of sarcasm at the corner of his lips. You can't have it all. Choose one. Fang Li lowered her head slightly. Time passed by minute, and Gu Zhaoting's patience was running out. Seeing him put down his crossed long legs and stand up to leave, Fang Li hurriedly asked, Boss Gu, is there no third option? Gu Zhaoting's eyes were calm and cold. Why do you bargain with me? Fang Li swayed, Boss Gu, but I'm sincere to Mingzhou. I can't leave him. Gu Zhaoting sneered, okay, I'll do that project for someone else. Fang Li's fingertips turned white, which was her agreement. No matter what, between the project and Gu Mingzhou, she would definitely choose Gu Mingzhou. She is not Fang Li, so she is not that stupid. There will be opportunities to do the project in the future, and Gu Mingzhou, she will not give up. Gu Zhaoting's pair of dark eyes swept across Fang Li's face lightly, with a smile on his face. He changed the subject, although you chose Gu Mingzhou, you still can't be together. Fang Li. He was stunned, and inexplicably felt that Gu Zhaoting was setting a trap for him. She looked at him in surprise, Mr. Gu, that's not what you just said. What did I say? Gu Zhaoting narrowed his eyes slightly, I didn't promise you not to give up the project. I can just turn a blind eye to your relationship. Fang Li's heart trembled. Gu Zhaoting's voice continued, you also know what happened last night. It caused quite a stir. As the head of the Gu family, if I don't deal with it, it won't be good if it gets out. Fang Li bit her lip fiercely, but I really love Mingzhou, please don't break us up. Gu Zhaoting leaned back on the sofa and said, don't break up. Sure. You can marry Gu Mingzhou and it will be over once and for all. It will save me a lot of trouble. Fang Li widened her eyes in surprise. Marry Gu Mingzhou. Doesn't she want to? However, the Gu family is a top wealthy family and they place the most emphasis on bloodline. Although Fang Li grew up in the Fang family and was pampered, in the eyes of the wealthy family, she was just a wild girl of unknown origin. And Gu Mingzhou's mother never even looked at her. So even if Fang Li is inferior to her in every way, the one who will be engaged to Gu Mingzhou can only be Fang Li. Fang Li quickly realized that Gu Zhaoting wanted her to give up. You are making things difficult for me, Mr. Gu. You know Mingzhou's mother very well. It is impossible for her to agree to let me in. How can I marry him? Gu Zhaoting was calm and composed, crossing his legs. She doesn't agree, but since you want to get married, can't you find a way yourself? Fang Li was stunned and asked subconsciously, what method? Ask me. Gu Zhaoting found it funny, his eyes were cold, you figure it out yourself, I'll only give you 3 days, if you can't make the Gu family give in, you'll have to leave. Fang Li's heart was trembling violently. 3 days. How can it be that easy? If she really had a way, she wouldn't have been hiding behind Gu Mingzhou and sneaking around with him for 3 years. Just at this time, Pei Jingxing came over with a glass of wine. He pointed at Gu Mingzhou, who was lying on the table drunk, and said, "Old Gu, your nephew has a normal alcohol tolerance. How come he passed out after only drinking a few drinks?" After saying this, Pei Jingxing looked at Fang Yuxi. "Can you carry it with your small body? How about I find someone to help you?" Fang Yuxi said nothing, turned around, helped Gu Mingzhou up, and let him lean on her shoulder. As expected, he was drunk and didn't react at all despite all the torture. Fang Yuxi was very confused, her mind full of Gu Zhaoting's words asking her to get out. In the midst of boredom, an idea popped into my mind. In fact, it is not completely impossible to break the deadlock, as long as she is willing to give it a try. When people encounter good wine, they will inevitably drink more. Not long after Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin left, Gu Zhaoting also got drunk. When Chen Zhu received Fang Li's call, he was about to help the drunk Gu Zhaoting into the car. Fang Li asked cautiously on the other end of the phone, "Chen Zhu, is your boss here?" Chen Zhu was stunned. "Ms. Fang, have you thought about it?" Chapter 20 Divorce. Fang Li held the phone tightly between her fingertips. "Can you give the phone to your boss?" Chen Zhu's voice sounded a little embarrassed. "Miss Fang, the boss drank too much tonight, so he might not be very polite." Halfway through his words, Gu Zhaoting, who was sitting in the back seat and should have fallen asleep with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He waved his hand and took Chen Zhu's phone. You're looking for me." Chen Zhu was stunned and touched the back of his head in confusion. The boss had to rely on him for support when walking just now. How come he seemed to be sober again all of a sudden? This is amazing. The drunk Gu Zhaoting's voice was low and deep, with a hint of drowsy magnetism. Fang Li was stunned. The moment the lazy and pleasant voice sounded in her ears, her scalp went numb and goosebumps appeared all over her body. How can someone's voice be so beautiful? Fang Li? It wasn't until someone on the other end of the phone called her name word by word that Fang Li came to her senses. She patted her cheek. "Can I see you?" "Okay," Gu Zhaoting agreed readily. Perhaps because he had drunk too much, he spoke slowly and in a more distracted manner. "Wait, I'll go to the hospital to find you. There's no need to be so anxious." Fang Li pursed her red lips. I could tell he was drunk, so it would be better to talk about this kind of thing when he's sober. There's no need to rush. However, since Chen Zhu called him boss, Fang Li was somewhat curious about what kind of company he ran. Business is not good nowadays. Even though you are boss, you still have to entertain people yourself. He got drunk probably because he is a poor boss who has to bow to others for the sake of the company. Fang Li gathered her palms together, then released them. "Let's do it tomorrow. You pick a location." After hesitating for a moment, Fang Li suggested, "Is 11 o'clock in the morning okay?" He drank too much, so he should get up late. This time should not disturb his rest. 8 o'clock. Gu Zhaoting stretched out a hand and rubbed his forehead to relieve the soreness in his head. Fang Li was stunned. 8 o'clock. Well, I'll pick you up from the hospital at 8 o'clock. Did he know that she would be discharged from the hospital tomorrow morning? Fang Li wanted to say that it was not necessary, but then she thought that they would meet tomorrow anyway, so she agreed. After hanging up the phone, Fang Li lay alone on the bed in the ward. Originally Song Yu wanted to stay with her in the hospital, but because of a business trip, I had to go to the airport in the middle of the night to catch a flight. Song Yu was a dancer. 3 years ago, she broke her leg in an accident and could no longer dance, so she switched careers and became a model. It's not easy to get into this business. In Song Yu's own words, "I haven't had a full meal in 3 years." She was afraid of disturbing Fang Li's rest, so she left as soon as it got dark. That night, Fang Li didn't sleep well because she was worried. When I woke up the next day, it was 7:30. Fang Li took out her phone out of habit, and a piece of news popped up, with a bold and eye-catching headline. The prince of the Gu family had a night out with a beautiful woman. During the night, he was suspected of cheating. The crown prince of the Gu family. Isn't he that Gu Mingzhou? Fang Li clicked on it and sure enough, Gu Mingzhou's photo appeared in her phone. He leaned on Fang Yuxin's shoulder, and the two of them hugged each other, appearing in a place that looked like a hotel late at night. As Fang Li slid her finger down, she saw more and more content. This morning, Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin walked out of the hotel room and were blocked outside the room by many reporters. The two of them entered the hotel at midnight yesterday, stayed in a room for the entire night, and only came out at 7 this morning. A man and a woman alone, you can imagine what happened. Fang Li just felt disgusted. In the picture, Gu Mingzhou protected Fang Yuxin's face to prevent her from being captured by the camera. Fang Li curled her lips into a self-deprecating smile. This was now set in stone. It was confirmed that Fang Yuxin had stolen her fiancé. I just don't know how my parents would react when they see this. Do you regret speaking for Fang Yuxin like that before? Thinking of her parents' favoritism, Fang Li felt inexplicably blocked in her heart. Until the door of the room was pushed open, and a man in a suit and tie walked in with his long legs. I have already completed the discharge procedures. He spoke in a soft voice, just like the moment when the first ray of sunlight in the morning shone down and the mist in the forest was automatically dispelled. So, Jiu Zhaoting lowered his eyes slightly, just in time to meet Fang Li's gaze. Have you considered that proposal? He meant marriage. Fang Li noticed that the man was still wearing the same shirt he wore last time they met, except that the third button that she had pulled off had been sewn back on. She clenched her palms, then unclenched them, her restraint visibly evident. I can marry you. But, Fang Li lowered her head and prepared to pick up her phone. I drafted a prenuptial agreement last night. Do you want to see it? Jiu Zhaoting. Fang Li observed the man's expression cautiously. Seeing his frown, Fang Li wondered, did I say something wrong? Fang Li couldn't sleep last night, so she thought about it carefully. She has nothing now, but this man is handsome and is a small boss. By marrying him, she should be the one who gets the advantage. After much thought, Fang Li decided to draft a prenuptial agreement. There is not much content, it is just about property. After marriage, they share the expenses equally, so if they divorce one day, she can leave the house with nothing. After all, now she is alone and has nothing, and she still expects a man to provide her with a place to live. Let me send it to you first. After saying that, Fang Li slid the screen to unlock it. Jiu Zhaoting approached her unexpectedly. Fang Li was startled, and then her slender wrist was grabbed by the man. No agreement is needed. Didn't you cancel the engagement? It was cancelled, but the other party is rich and powerful. I'm afraid of you. No. Not afraid. But that person is the Prince of Beijing Circle, Gu Mingzhou. Fang Li asked again, but what if my ex-fiancé takes revenge on you? Jiu Zhaoting chuckled, no. Fang Li was silent for 2 seconds. She didn't know why, but when she saw the determination in the man's eyes, she inexplicably felt that he was really not afraid. His aura was so strong that Fang Li took a deep breath. This kind of husband was exactly what she needed. It's her life and she is free to marry whomever she wants. Now that she has decided to start over, she will not regret it. Fang Li, okay, let's get married. Yeah. The man responded softly, nodded, and walked out of the ward. Turning around, he saw Fang Li still standing there without moving, so he turned back and grabbed her wrist. What are you still standing there for? Jiu Zhaoting raised his thin lips, and said in a deep voice with a hint of briskness, go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. R. Fang Li was stunned for a moment. Although her legs followed the man's steps, her brain could not keep up. There was obvious surprise in her voice. Now. Isn't it a bit too fast? Well, is there any problem? Jiu Zhaoting turned his head and met Fang Li's eyes. I didn't bring my household registration book. I may need to go home. Thinking of that home, Fang Li lowered her eyes. She disappeared for 2 days and her family didn't call her at all. As expected, she is a dispensable existence. However, Fang Li has relieved that she will soon have a new home. Can I pick it up tomorrow? Jiu Zhaoting thought for 2 seconds and nodded, okay. As she was speaking, Fang Li's stomach suddenly growled twice. She was startled and quickly covered her mouth with her hands, a look of embarrassment flashing across her face. She glanced at the man's face and wondered if he would think she was inappropriate. Fang Li was extremely embarrassed. At this moment, a voice rang in her ears. I'm hungry, too. Jiu Zhaoting's voice was very soft. He stretched out his hand to open the passenger door and motioned for her to get in the car. Do you want to go to the restaurant or eat at home? Fang Li subconsciously turned her head to look at him. The man looked normal, without a trace of disgust on his face. She felt relieved, but didn't dare to make a decision on her own, fearing that she would upset him. I'll follow your arrangements. Jiu Zhaoting noticed Fang Li's reserve. He didn't say much, but nodded slightly and sat in the driver's seat. The car passed through the busiest streets in northern Beijing and finally stopped outside an inconspicuous alley. The restaurant is at the end of the alley. It is not very big, but it is clean. After ordering the food, Yu Zhaoting walked to the door of the store and answered a phone call. When he came back, the food was just served. She didn't order too many dishes, but each one was light and delicate, very suitable for sick people like Fang Li. Yu Zhaoting pushed all the food in front of Fang Li. I come here often, it tastes good, you try it. Fang Li blinked. There were so many that she couldn't finish them all by herself. She pushed a portion of fried buns back to the man. You eat too. Just at this moment, the proprietress came out. The moment she saw Yu Zhaoting, a hint of surprise flashed across the proprietress's eyes, and she asked curiously. Eh? Young man, why are you here again? Didn't you come once this morning? Fang Li looked at him suspiciously. Yu Zhaoting cleared his throat. His normally reserved face was now filled with a hint of embarrassment. Madam Boss, your business is so good, did you remember it wrong? The proprietress scratched her head in confusion. Did I remember it wrong? It's 6 in the morning, and it's still dark. Wasn't he the first customer to enter the store? They even chatted for a few minutes at that time. She said, why are you getting up so early to go to work? Well, I'm going to meet someone important. Did I really recognize the wrong person? Although the proprietress was surprised, she didn't say much. On the side, Fang Li pursed her lips and stopped pushing the food in front of Yu Zhaoting. But I have an indescribable feeling in my heart. He said, I'm hungry too, because he was afraid that she would be embarrassed. Is there anyone who cares about her emotions? Fang Li plucked her skirt with her fingers and suddenly felt that this man would not be such a bad husband. At this moment, the man looked at her with a pair of dark eyes, and his voice was as magnetic and pleasant as ever. After dinner, I will accompany you home to get the household registration book. Fang Li paused with her fingers holding the spoon. Thinking of her parents' attitude towards her, Fang Li lowered her eyes. No, I can go back by myself. She had a bad relationship with her family, and no one knew why, but she didn't want them to know. Yu Zhaoting's gaze fixed on Fang Li's face for a moment, without saying much. At this moment, the TV in the restaurant suddenly started playing entertainment gossip. The sound was so loud that Fang Li subconsciously turned her head to look. Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin were blocked outside the room by many reporters. Fang Yuxin covered her face and hid behind Gu Mingzhou. The camera and flash surrounded the two of them. At one moment, the camera even moved to the big bed behind them. What a big bed! There were security guards maintaining order at the scene. Fang Li was stunned and noticed the words, live broadcast, in the upper right corner of the TV. Are they still stuck in the hotel and haven't come out yet? Yu Zhaoting followed Fang Li's gaze and glanced at the TV. At this moment, his cell phone rang again. The moment he picked up the phone and walked out, Yu Zhaoting waved his hand and turned off the TV. Fang Li looked over in confusion. Yu Zhaoting tilted his head and shook the phone in his palm. It's too noisy. It disturbs me. She didn't say much, finished the food in the bowl, and walked out just as Yu Zhaoting hung up the phone. You really don't need me to accompany you home. He knew that she was not in a good situation in the Fang family. But if he had accompanied her back, probably the situation would be very different. Fang Li shook her head, not wanting to drag him into it and make him suffer. Need not. Yu Zhaoting did not force it any further. Okay, then after you get the household registration booklet, go back to where I live. Fang Li nodded and checked the address on her phone. It was an upscale residential area in the city center. I originally thought that he was just an ordinary small boss, but now it seems that the company's business is doing pretty well. After the man drove away, Fang Li was still a little confused. Did he forget to tell her his name? Forget it, they are going to get married anyway, there is no rush, it won't be too late to ask later. Fang Li took a taxi back to Fang's house. The door is closed. Chapter 22 I have no room to resist. She rang the doorbell twice, and the servant opened the door a little and poked a head out. Seeing that it was Fang Li, the servant was surprised and asked, Miss, you are back. She responded softly and walked into their house. Miss. The servant looked as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Are you looking for your wife? She has a headache and is resting in her room. She said she doesn't want to see anyone. The servant looked at Fang Li with pity. Who would have thought that the daughter of the Fang family, who was obviously a respectable young lady, was sent to prison for 3 years of training? Look at his skinny appearance. He must have suffered a lot in prison during the past 3 years. If I don't look for her, where are my old things? Where did they go? The servant was startled and quickly said, in the utility room. Fang Li thanked him and walked towards the utility room. All her things were piled in a small box in the corner of the utility room. The box was covered with a layer of dust, which choked Fang Li and made her cough twice. She waved her hand to open it and quickly found her household registration booklet inside. Fang Li didn't plan to stay any longer, so she closed the box and prepared to leave. At this moment, the corner of her eye suddenly fell on a corner of the box. There lay a neatly folded men's scarf. The grey knitted scarf has lost its original luster, perhaps because it is too old. Fang Li was a little dazed. She slowly squatted down and gently stroked it with her hand. The warm texture was still as warm and comfortable as before. But her state of mind has long been different. Fang Li took out the scarf and put it on her arm. She was going to get rid of it and throw it into the trash can outside the door. After all, this was Gu Mingzhou's thing, so there was no need for her to keep it. Just like her feelings for him, she no longer has the slightest attachment to him. Unexpectedly, just after walking out of the utility room, I bumped into Fang Yuxin, who looked frightened, who had just returned from outside. Fang Yuxin ran so fast, as if there was a ghost behind her. She lost her balance and fell to the ground, screaming in pain. She was stunned when she saw that the person in front of her was Fang Li. Why is it you? Why are you back? Fang Li glanced at her with a very cold expression. This is my home, isn't it normal for me to come back? When Fang Yuxin saw the scarf in Fang Li's hand, her face suddenly froze. Of course she knew that the scarf belonged to Gu Mingzhou. Over the past 10 years, Fang Li had treasured the scarf and almost treated it as a treasure. Are you going to take it and apologize to Mingzhou? Do you want to win him back? Want to read chapter 22 of I'm Spoiled by My Scumbag Uncle, What's Wrong with Me Being a Little Arrogant, written by Wu Yuhong. Don't I have any room to resist? Please remember. Fang Li didn't want to get entangled with her anymore, so she said calmly, You think too much, I don't have such an intention. You should have read the news. Fang Yuxin said suddenly. The news about her and Gu Mingzhou this morning should have been all over the place by now. Fang Yuxin hired the paparazzi herself. Her original plan was to take the intimate photos taken by the paparazzi and cry to Gu Mingzhou that their affair was about to be exposed. Of course, it wasn't really exposed, it was just acting in front of Gu Mingzhou. In order to minimize public opinion, Gu Mingzhou will most likely go home and beg his mother to change his engagement partner to her. I guess the Gu family won't say much in order to protect their reputation. After all, once this matter is exposed, it involves ethical issues and the Gu family will be pushed to the forefront. The adverse effects brought about are far more serious than marrying her. This is the only way Fang Yuxin can think of to marry Gu Mingzhou. But she had planned everything, but she didn't know what went wrong. The paparazzi turned out to be a TV reporter. When she walked out of the hotel room this morning, Fang Yuxin was stunned to see dozens of cameras pointed at her face. The incident got out of hand. It was even broadcast live on the 8 a.m. TV. It didn't end well. Now, everyone in the country knows that she and Gu Mingzhou are having an affair and she stole her sister's man. No one knows what the Gu family's attitude is. It is said that the share price of Wanyu fell to the limit at the opening this morning. The problem could obviously be solved by taking a few intimate photos, but it was made known to everyone by the reporters. Fang Yuxin was very upset and her reputation was completely ruined. She regretted being too impulsive and was very angry. Who called the radio reporter? It completely disrupted her plans. Fang Li, you should have seen Mingzhou protecting me in front of the camera, right? I am the only one in his heart. Fang Yuxin gathered her chaotic thoughts and looked at Fang Li with a mocking look. Do you think Mingzhou will still pay attention to you if you apologize to him now? Fang Li really didn't want to continue talking nonsense with Fang Yuxin. Since you like to pick up men from the trash can, Gu Mingzhou will be given to you. I don't care. After saying that, he walked past her and prepared to leave. When talking about Gu Mingzhou, the expression on Fang Li's face was too bland. Fang Yuxin was stunned, she couldn't believe it. You really don't want to marry Gu Mingzhou? Then where is the scarf in your hand? Aren't you going to take it to Mingzhou? He thought of their old relationship and changed his mind. Fang Li lowered her head and looked at the things in her hand. I was going to throw it away. After saying that, he threw it into the trash can beside him. Fang Yusin was surprised and was about to say something when a loud curse suddenly came from upstairs. Fang Li! What did you do to your sister? Why is she sitting on the ground? Sun Wanqi walked downstairs quickly and saw Fang Yusin sitting on the ground. She was so angry that she almost exploded. Did you push your sister? She stepped forward, helped Fang Yusin up, and said to Fang Li angrily, how can you be so vicious? You stir up trouble as soon as you get home. Do you want to piss me off to death? Sun Wanqi looked at Fang Yusin carefully, and only felt relieved when she was sure that she was not injured. Fang Li felt calm. She had given up on family ties that night. I didn't push it. If you don't believe me, ask her yourself. Sun Wanqi looked at Fang Yusin, who quickly said, Mom, I fell down accidentally. Sun Wanqi was startled. Yusin, you don't have to help Ali cover up, just tell me if you've been wronged. I really fell down by myself. After saying that, Fang Yusin looked at Fang Li again. Ali, don't blame Mom. She misunderstood you because she didn't know the truth. Fang Li lowered her eyebrows and a hint of sneer appeared at the corner of her lips. Fang Li, who was about to leave, sneered, Mom, did you see the news this morning? Hearing this, Fang Yusin's face froze and a hint of guilt flashed in her eyes. Sure enough, when Sun Wanqi heard Fang Li mention this, her face turned cold. In her eyes, her eldest daughter, who had always been well behaved, would not do such a shameless thing and bring shame to the family. But the live broadcast on TV was very detailed and it gave her a headache for the whole morning. Sun Wanqi pursed her lips. Yusin, you and Gu Mingzhou are really. Fang Yusin's eyes turned red and she started crying as soon as she opened her mouth. Mom, I'm sorry. Mingzhou was drunk last night and he brought me to their hotel. I was weak and had no chance to resist. Chapter 23 Generous Boss Gu. Upon hearing this, Sun Wanqi frowned and complained, Gu Mingzhou is such a jerk. He's already engaged to your sister, but why is he forcing you to mess around? Fang Yusin gently wiped the red corners of her eyes. Mom, Mingzhou also drank too much, it's not his fault. Speaking of which, in this matter, Ali is also a victim. Only then did Sun Wanqi realize that Fang Li was still here. Fang Li loves Gu Mingzhou so much, she must be feeling bad right now. Sun Wanqi snorted coldly, you can't even keep an eye on your own man, who can you blame? If Fang Li hadn't made Mingzhou angry that night, you wouldn't have gone to ask Mingzhou for her and damaged your reputation. After saying that, Sun Wanqi frowned and looked at Fang Li, now it's all right. Your sister lost her virginity to Gu Mingzhou for you, and she also bore the infamy. Hearing this, Fang Li's steps suddenly stopped. Is this the end? These two are shameless and fooling around together, and they can even involve me in this. Sometimes Fang Li really doubts who is the biological child between herself and Fang Yusin. Why do family members always blame her for the problem without any reason? Fang Yusin would have been fine, she was already taking over her position and competing for her parents' love. But are Sun Wanqi and Fang Fu blind? It is shameful not to be able to distinguish right from wrong. Fang Li's eyes flashed with sarcasm. Did I force them to go to their hotel and get a room? There should be a limit to partiality. If you push me too far, believe it or not, I will go to the reporters right now and say that they have been fooling around for a long time. Fang Yusin even had 2 abortions for Gu Mingzhou. Disgusting me, right? Okay, no one will have an easy time. Sun Wanqi, you. What nonsense are you talking about, kid? You are so ignorant. Fang Li didn't stay any longer. She turned around, slammed the door, and left without looking back, leaving Sun Wanqi and Fang Yusin in a mess in the living room. After a long while, Sun Wanqi finally reacted, her eyes full of disbelief. Yusin? You had an abortion. Have you really been in love with Mingzhou for a long time? A hint of guilt flashed across Fang Yusin's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a look of grievance. Mom, don't listen to my sister's nonsense. She was forced into a corner and deliberately provoked us. I am innocent, how could I do such a thing? Sun Wanqi finally breathed a sigh of relief. She said with emotion, Ali really grew up in a gambler's family. She lies easily. I wish she was half as obedient as you. Fang Yusin got the advantage and still acted cute. It's okay, Li can be taught slowly. She was wrong today, and you shouldn't say that to her. Sun Wanqi disagreed. Unfair. You are the one who lost your reputation, why should she feel wronged? She has been in prison for 3 years and she is still like this. The more Sun Wanqi thought about it, the angrier she got. This daughter is really a waste. Fang Yusin seemed to have been reminded of something sad. Last night's incident was too much of a fuss. I am too embarrassed to see anyone. When it comes to this, Sun Wanqi gets a headache. However, she still patted Fang Yusin's shoulder in a soothing manner. Yu Mingzhou is to blame for this matter. I'll ask your father to ask him what he really meant. He will definitely be responsible for destroying your innocence. Hearing this, Fang Yusin breathed a sigh of relief. She was not worried about Yu Mingzhou at all. It seemed that she would be able to marry into the Yu family soon. Fang Li walked out of the Fang family and it took her a long time to calm down. It was a place she had hoped to return to as a teenager, but now she felt sick to stay there for even a second longer. It doesn't matter. People can't always be haunted by the past. She hailed a taxi on the side of the road and after about 40 minutes drive, she arrived at the gate of a residential area in the city center. The community is in a good location with convenient transportation nearby, and it is a good place to find peace and quiet in a bustling city. It is not a new property, it is about 10 years old, but fortunately the environment and security system are good. Fang Li paid the taxi fare and walked into the community. As soon as I entered the elevator, a phone call came in. Seeing that it was Song Yu calling, she quickly pressed the answer button. Honey, I almost forgot, you are being discharged from the hospital today, right? There was noisy background noise on the other end of the phone. Song Yu must have called during the break in filming. If you don't want to go back to the Fang family, come to my house first. I'll tell you the address and door lock code. Fang Li, no need, you and Pei Jingxing are married, it's not appropriate for me to go there. Although Song Yu and Pei Jingxing were in an arranged marriage and had little affection for each other, they were, after all, a legitimate couple who had obtained a marriage certificate. It would definitely be inconvenient for Fang Li to live in someone else's house, not to mention that Song Yu is on a business trip now. She has to avoid suspicion. Song Yu asked worriedly, where are you going? Jiang Yi, my fiancé's house. Upon hearing this, Song Yu exploded on the other end of the phone, looking a bit disappointed. Ali, didn't you say you figured it out and you're not with Yu Mingzhou anymore? Did he hang himself on a crooked tree? Why did you go to see him again? You are such a loser. I really want to clear out the water in your brain. Song Yu watched the morning news on the plane and was furious. It's disgusting that those two scumbags and bitch checked into a hotel and made it known to everyone. Song Yu made this call originally to comfort Fang Li, but unexpectedly Fang Li turned around and went to find Yu Mingzhou. You're not going to beg Yu Mingzhou to change his mind again, are you? No, he's already cheated on you, and you can tolerate that. When Fang Li heard this, she knew that Song Yu had misunderstood. She quickly said, the fiancé I'm talking about is not Yu Mingzhou. Song Yu was stunned for 7 or 8 seconds on the other end of the phone. If it's not Yu Mingzhou, then who is it? No, Li, when did you get any new information? What's his name? What does he do? Fang Li couldn't answer any of the questions Song Yu asked. Because she currently doesn't know her fiancé much more than Song Yu. I'll tell you about this later. I'm at his house now. I'll hang up now. Fang Li entered the password and went in, but there was no one in the room. The house is not too big, but the lighting is excellent. The sunlight shines in obliquely and shines on the floor, giving a feeling of peaceful and quiet life. It seems that there are not many signs of life here. Does that man really live here? Fang Li put on slippers and walked in. Just after walking around the house, her phone rang. There was a text message. There were ingredients in the refrigerator. If you don't want to cook, you can go out to eat. The bank card is on the shoe cabinet. There is no limit. You can use it as you like. I'm working overtime tonight and will be back late. Don't wait for me. Go to bed early and go to get the certificate tomorrow morning. Chapter 24 Cancellation of Engagement with Fang Li. After receiving the text message, Fang Li immediately went to the shoe cabinet and put away her bank card. She wasn't going to spend it carelessly. After all, people were so generous to her because she once saved their lives. One should not be greedy. As for his promise of a lifetime, she wouldn't believe it. Sincerity is sincerity, but sincerity changes rapidly. Having suffered a loss once, she should have learned her lesson. Gu Zhaoting on the other end of the phone waited for a few minutes, but there was no response from Fang Li. A hint of disappointment flashed in his deep eyes. He pursed his lips and gently turned off the screen of his phone. Boss Gu, Guanyu's stock price hit the limit down early this morning, and even the old man was alarmed. Chen Zhu placed 2 documents in front of Gu Zhaoting. This morning's news had a huge impact, and the public relations department has drawn up a solution. Would you like to take a look first? After all, this is a matter concerning the Gu family, so the public relations department is very cautious and has to ask for Gu Zhaoting's opinion first. Gu Zhaoting didn't even raise his eyelids and said coldly, "Tell the public relations department not to interfere. Whoever caused this should deal with it themselves." Chen Zhu nodded, closed the office door and went out. Half an hour later, Gu Mingzhou rushed in excitedly, "Uncle, what do you mean? For such a big matter, you don't let the public relations department take action. Do you want outsiders to laugh at our family?" Gu Zhaoting was concentrating on processing the documents in front of him, as if he didn't hear it and didn't even raise his head. The office was so quiet that Gu Mingzhou finally realized that he had been too impulsive and spoke harshly. He instantly restrained himself a lot and called out tentatively, "Uncle." Gu Mingzhou was very annoyed. Pei Jingxing dragged him to drink last night. Unexpectedly, their wine was so strong that after 2 glasses, he was drunk and unconscious. He didn't even remember how he and Fang Yuxin went to the hotel. This morning, I was blocked at the door of my room by that group of reporters again. It was really overwhelming. Uncle, can you please say something? Gu Zhaoting then put down the documents and looked at Gu Mingzhou with his deep eyes. You know it's embarrassing, but you're still messing around out there. You're the one who's embarrassing yourself. Find a way to solve it yourself. This cold tone made Gu Mingzhou feel disappointed. Uncle, we all have the surname Gu. If this matter becomes so serious, it will be the entire Gu family who will be embarrassed. Besides, even if you don't care about me, are you going to watch the stock price of Guanyu continue to fall? Gu Zhaoting sneered and remained unmoved. The world can fall, and you did something that ruined the family tradition, and you still come to me for help. How can you be so? Gu Mingzhou felt that Gu Zhaoting was too unkind. But it's normal when you think about it. Universal Group was implicated in his affairs for no reason. Hundreds of billions evaporated in just one morning. Now all the shareholders in the entire company must hate him to death. Chen Zhu knocked on the door and came in. He glanced at Gu Mingzhou and said, "Fang Yuxin is here to see manager Gu." Gu Mingzhou was about to go out to meet her when Gu Zhaoting said coldly, "Call the person in." Fang Yuxin, Mingzhou, our affair has become too big a deal. Yasheng's stock price has also been affected. If this continues, the losses will only increase. As soon as Fang Yuxin entered the room, she saw Gu Zhaoting was also here. Her face froze, and she quickly called out, "Boss Gu." Gu Mingzhou noticed that Fang Yuxin had a scarf draped over her arm and quickly recognized that it was the one he had given to Fang Li 10 years ago. He was surprised. "This is. I found it this morning in the Fang family's trash can. It should have been thrown away by my sister. I remember it was yours, Mingzhou. Do you still want it?" Gu Mingzhou's face was throbbing with blue veins. "Great. Very good. Fang Li, you're really great." Fang Yuxin looked self-blaming and guilty. Maybe it was the news this morning that upset her. "Mingzhou, how about I explain it to her?" Gu Mingzhou said coldly, "Uncle, my engagement with Fang Li is cancelled. Change it to Yu Xin. Since Fang Li dared to throw his things, he would make her regret it for the rest of her life. Isn't it because you are engaged to him that you dare to do this? Look, the engagement is broken. Where can Fang Li go to cry?" Gu Zhaoting's dark eyes flashed with a deep feeling. "Oh." Gu Mingzhou gritted his teeth and said, "Tell everyone that Fang Li has been in prison for 3 years and is not worthy of me. The marriage has already been changed to Yu Xin. It's just that it has never been announced to the public. This way, what happened between Yu Xin and I this morning will be legitimate." Fang Yuxin was ecstatic. The stage was set up and the play had already reached this point. She was still thinking about how to mention this to Gu Mingzhou without leaving any trace. She didn't expect that he would actually think of this on his own initiative. Although Fang Yuxin had originally imagined that things would not become so serious and her reputation would not be ruined, fortunately the result was the same. "It's worth it to marry into the Gu family even if my reputation is ruined." Hearing this, Gu Zhaoting threw the teacup in front of him heavily onto the table, making a harsh sound. The atmosphere suddenly became tense, making Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin feel nervous. You say? What? Who is unworthy of who? There was a murderous look in Gu Zhaoting's eyes, which made people feel a chilling coldness. Hasn't Fang Li explained the prison incident very clearly? It was the woman next to you who framed her in order to get her in jail. It's obviously you who let Fang Li down, but you still want to put all the problems on her. Cancel the engagement, fine. I have no objection, but you should take responsibility for your own actions. Don't drag a woman into taking the blame for everything. What did Fang Li do wrong? You are the one who changed your heart, and she is the one who got hurt. Are you going to let her cover up your affair? Are you going to put all the blame on her? Gu Mingzhou, there is no man as cowardly as you. You are doing such a heartless and stupid thing, and you are tarnishing the reputation of my Gu family. Gu Zhaoting's tone became increasingly cold, and every word he said came like a gust of wind. Gu Mingzhou felt a little embarrassed after being scolded, and his face turned pale and blue. I couldn't hold back the breath I was holding in my heart anymore. Okay, I'll take the blame myself. I'll tell everyone that my relationship with Fang Li has broken down, and Yu Xin and I will hold a press conference right now to calm this storm. The longer things are delayed, the more troublesome they will become. Gu Mingzhou just wants to solve it quickly today. Gu Zhaoting said calmly, it's up to you, but does your mother know? When Gu Mingzhou heard Gu Zhaoting mention his mother, his face froze. Xiong Ruili didn't like Fang Yuxin. She always thought she was a wild girl of unknown origin, and never looked at her seriously. Originally, Gu Mingzhou wanted to hold a press conference immediately. Once the news was announced, it would be set in stone that Xiong Ruili didn't like Fang Yuxin, and there would be nothing that could be done about it. Gu Mingzhou didn't say anything, but Gu Zhaoting guessed what he was thinking. He waved his hand, indicating that they could go out. After the two of them left, Fang Yuxin was secretly happy but also very nervous. Mingzhou, don't you really need to inform your mother first? And Fang Li, what if she pesters you again in the future and begs you to change your mind? This is what Fang Yuxin is most worried about. She acted first and asked for permission later. She offended her mother-in-law before she even entered the house. And there is Fang Li. Although Gu Mingzhou favors her now, Fang Yuxin always feels with a woman's sixth sense that during the 7 years that he and Fang Li have been entangled, he is not completely without feelings for Fang Li. What if Fang Li really regrets it in the future and asks Gu Mingzhou to change her mind? What should she do then? Gu Mingzhou disagreed and leaned over to kiss Fang Yuxin on the forehead. What are you thinking? Why should I change my mind? She is far inferior to you. As for my mother, it was me who married the wife, not her. Chapter 25 Wife, are you waiting for me? Before Gu Mingzhou and Fang Yuxin had gone far, Chen Zhu chased after them. Ms. Fang, please stay. Fang Yuxin turned back in confusion. Assistant Chen, is there anything else Mr. Gu can do for you? Chen Zhu cast a meaningful look at Fang Yuxin. Mr. Gu said that Miss Fang was resolute and swift. He gave her 3 days, but she burned her boats and broke out in just 1 day. But Miss Fang's move was a bit ruthless, causing the share price of Wanqiu to fall again and again. He thought that this was the first time, so he could let it go. But after entering the Gu family, he would have to learn the rules again. Fang Yuxin's expression froze, and after hearing what came next, her face turned even uglier. Was he obviously trying to tell Gu Mingzhou that what happened last night was all planned by her? She turned her head and looked at Gu Mingzhou guiltily. Gu Mingzhou's eyes flashed with suspicion. What 3 days? Chen Zhu looked like he had accidentally said something wrong, and hesitated. Oh, I forgot. Mr. Gu asked me to tell Miss Fang in private. I'm sorry, Miss Fang, this is a matter between you and young Master Mingzhou. You should explain it to him yourself. After saying that, Chen Zhu left without looking back. Gu Mingzhou was silent for a moment, then after thinking about the whole thing, he vaguely understood something. So, you had arranged the TV reporter this morning in advance, right? You actually planned this. Fang Yuxin clenched her palms and pursed her lips. She knew very well that Gu Mingzhou's character, once the suspicion was aroused, if she did not tell the truth, the rift would only get deeper and deeper. Mingzhou, I just wanted to find a paparazzi to take some photos. I don't know why he suddenly became a TV reporter and made such a big deal out of it. Gu Mingzhou likes Fang Yusin and has thought about marrying her despite his family's opposition. But because of this plot, he was forced to take this step, which made Gu Mingzhou feel very uncomfortable. When you are pushed forward by others, it is inevitable to develop a rebellious mentality. Seeing that Gu Mingzhou looked so unhappy, Fang Yusin wanted to hold his hand. "Mingzhou, I just want to be with you so much." Gu Mingzhou said nothing and walked forward. Mingzhou. Seeing him avoiding her touch, Fang Yusin's eyes quickly turned red. Gu Mingzhou then turned around to look at her, his voice filled with helplessness. "Aren't we going to hold a press conference? The reporters are already in place, wipe your tears quickly." Hearing this, Fang Yusin finally breathed a sigh of relief. She ran 2 steps, and suddenly got into Gu Mingzhou's arms, put her arms around his waist, and spoke. The tone was soft and humble. "I want to stand with you openly, Mingzhou. I admit that you blame me, but your uncle only gave me 3 days. If I can't stand by your side openly, he will punish me. I don't care about it myself, but I just can't bear to leave you, so I have to do this." Gu Mingzhou thought of Fang Yusin's forbearance while staying by his side all these years, and suddenly hugged her with great heartache. Love is indeed selfish, and it's all because Fang Yusin loves him too much. But Fang Li had never calculated himself. He lowered his eyes dim. Perhaps it was because of the change of environment, or perhaps it was because they had to get the marriage certificate early the next morning. Fang Li couldn't sleep. "I was tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep, when suddenly I heard the door lock outside click." She looked at the time. It was already 12:30 in the morning. Was he back? Fang Li put on his slippers and stood up. Just as he walked to the entrance, the door was opened from the outside. The man in a suit was drunk. When he entered the room, he tripped over the threshold and fell on her without warning. Fang Li staggered back a few steps, and because she was completely unprepared, she hugged Gu Mingzhou tightly. Her eyes widened in surprise. The scent of male hormones filled her nostrils, and the tip of his nose pressed against her cheek, making it feel slightly hot. The door behind him closed automatically with a clang, blocking out the light coming in from the corridor outside. In the dim space, she could hear the man's heavy breathing and the tip of his nose rubbing against her cheek. Fang Li turned her face slightly, but the corner of her lips accidentally slid across the man's cheek. She felt as if she was electrocuted all over and her heart was beating like a drum. What did she just do? Did she kiss him? Her fingertips trembled slightly, and Fang Li subconsciously grabbed the man's clothes on his chest to prevent him from falling. At the same time, she lowered her head and quietly checked the expression of the man in front of her. Fortunately, he was drunk and rested his forehead on her shoulder, and didn't seem to notice her abruptness. Fang Li breathed a sigh of relief and asked softly, "Are you okay? How much alcohol did he drink to get so drunk? It's really hard to be a boss these days." Gu Mingzhou didn't say anything, but his black pupils flashed when Fang Li accidentally kissed him. He waved his hand and hooked Fang Li's waist. The intoxicating smell of alcohol emanated from his thin lips, and his deep voice was a little hoarse. "Wife, are you still awake?" "Old wife." Fang Li pursed her lips. When she suddenly heard this name, she felt like she was struck by lightning. But think about it, they are going to get their marriage certificate tomorrow, so it seems right to call it that. Gu Mingzhou spoke slowly, probably because he drank too much. "You are still awake so late, are you waiting for me?" Fang Li said nothing and helped him sit down on the sofa. Probably because he was drunk, the man who was abstinent and gentle during the day became less aggressive and looked quite a bit like a puppy. Milk dog. As soon as this idea came up, it was rejected by Fang Li. "Would you like some water?" Fang Li squatted in front of the man and looked up at him. "Shall I pour you a glass?" The man closed his eyes and didn't respond, as if he was about to fall asleep. Fang Li waited for a while, but didn't get his response, so she turned around and prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, a hand suddenly reached out from behind, pinched the back of her neck, and pulled her back violently. Fang Li was caught off guard and knelt on one knee on the man's thigh. Then, without waiting for her to react, the man suddenly touched his forehead with hers. When their eyes met, Fang Li's heartbeat suddenly quickened, thumping as if it was about to jump out. The drunk Gu Mingzhou exuded a sense of domineering and aggressiveness. The breath with the scent of wine sprayed all over her face. Time passed minute by minute, and Fang Li just breathed a sigh of relief, but the next second, the man's hot thin lips kissed her. Fang Li felt like she was dreaming. Otherwise, why would she be held in the man's arms and kissed now? She spread her legs and sat on the man's thighs. He held her waist with one hand and held her tightly against him. Fang Li was so surprised that she even forgot to push him away. By the time she reacted, Fang Li's lips had been pried open, and the man's shirt had been pushed up by her so that its original appearance could not be seen. Chapter 26 The Righteous Mrs. Gu. Fang Li seemed frightened. She didn't even look at the man on the sofa. She pushed him away and ran into the room without looking back. The moment the door was closed, Gu Zhaoting, who was originally drunk and unconscious, became clear-eyed. He touched his thin lips lightly with his fingers, still feeling unsatisfied. Just at this moment, Pei Jingxing's text message came in, "Are you home?" Gu Zhaoting, "Yeah." Pei Jingxing, "You replied so quickly. Are you drunk?" Gu Zhaoting turned his head and glanced at the closed door of the room. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. After more than 10 seconds, he picked up his phone and typed, "I'm getting married tomorrow." The topic changed so quickly that Pei Jingxing didn't react for a moment. After they realized what was happening, they couldn't help but say something insulting. "No way, you were drunk and dreamed that the country gave you a wife." Gu Zhaoting was full of pride in his words. "You are right, my wife is in my room right now, lying on my bed." On the other end of the phone, Pei Jingxing was silent for a full minute. Fang Li. Gu Zhaoting, "Yeah." Pei Jingxing, "What did you do in the room?" Gu Zhaoting, "A man and a woman alone, late at night, drunk, alone in a room. What happened, can I tell you?" Pei Jingxing felt that Gu Zhaoting was a bit of a dog. He didn't say anything, but every word he said was a hint. Gu Zhaoting, "I don't mean anything else, I just want to remind you to remember to give your sister-in-law a red envelope." Pei Jingxing. He guessed that Gu Zhaoting was in a good mood in the middle of the night and suddenly talked so much to him, which must be something bad. It turns out that she is thinking about his red envelope. On the other side, after Fang Li closed the door, her heart was beating wildly. She lay in bed and took deep breaths for a long time before she gradually calmed down. Who would have thought that her first kiss would be given to a man she had only met a few times? What's even more outrageous is that she is going to get married with this man tomorrow, but she still doesn't even know his name. Fang Li has never been attracted to any man other than Gu Mingzhou, let alone had any intimate contact with him. In fact, the reason for her flash marriage was not only to find a place for herself to settle down. She was tired and exhausted. Having experienced the most cruel abandonment in the world and seen the most sinister human heart, she wants to find someone to live a good life with. She knew very well that she and Gu Mingzhou were a thing of the past. Since she had decided to get married, she should do it. Ready to start over with another man. But, isn't this progress a little too fast? On the first night together, they kissed. The more Fang Li thought about it, the redder her cheeks became. As several inappropriate images for children flashed through her mind, she couldn't help but wrap herself in the quilt and twist it around. He patted his cheeks and forced himself not to think about it anymore. She fell into a sleepy state, and when she opened her eyes again, it was already bright outside the window. Fang Li finished washing up in the room, lowered her head and twirled her fingers, wondering whether to go out. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the room. Gu Zhaoting's deep and magnetic voice came from outside the door, "Are you awake?" Fang Li was stunned for a moment, took a deep breath, and then walked over to open the door. What came into view was a handsome and flawless face of a man. He was wearing a classic white shirt and black trousers with a bow tie, which highlighted his already noble temperament to the extreme. It's like it came out of a comic book. Their eyes met, Gu Zhaoting's Adam's apple rolled, his dark eyes fixed on Fang Li's plump red lips. "Come out for breakfast." Fang Li lowered her head slightly. He looked normal, so he probably didn't remember that they kissed last night, right? Well, how many drunk people remember what happened? Fang Li breathed a sigh of relief and followed the man to the restaurant. Breakfast was tomato and egg noodles. Even though the man in front of me was eating noodles, it gave me the feeling of eating high-end Western food. There were no servants at home, so the noodles were made by him himself. She lives on someone else's territory. Not only does she get up later than the owner, she also asks the other person to cook for her. Isn't that a bit too arrogant? Fang Li looked up at him and said hesitantly, "I'll make breakfast from now on." Hearing this, Gu Zhaoting put down his chopsticks, as if he knew what she was thinking. In our own home, we don't care about this. Our own home? Fang Li was stunned, because these 5 words gave her a strange feeling. It was as if a warm breeze blew gently, creating ripples in the lake of her heart. Does she have her own home now? Eat more. Gu Zhaoting put the meatballs on the plate in front of Fang Li. His movements were natural and familiar. I don't want you to be too thin. Fang Li pursed her lips and nodded blankly. Too thin, 168 centimeters tall, less than 90 centimeters. Jin, ridiculously thin. After dinner, Fang Li went to wash the dishes, but was held down by Gu Zhaoting. An auntie will come to clean up later, so you don't have to do anything. So what do I need? Grow some meat. Fang Li suddenly thought of a very important question. I don't know yet. What's your name? Gu Zhaoting paused with his fingers holding the coat, and only turned back after the last button was buttoned. Their eyes met, and the man's big hand grasped her wrist. Before Fang Li could react, he held her fingers tightly. Feeling the warm palms wrapping around her, Fang Li looked up in surprise, and met Gu Zhaoting's eyes that seemed to be smiling but not smiling. Gu Zhaoting, your man. Fang Li was stunned. Also surnamed Gu. I seem to have heard this name somewhere before. While I was stunned, Gu Zhaoting leaned over and his warm breath hit my face, making me feel a little numb. Don't be so reserved in front of me. After all, we kissed last night, don't you think so, Mrs. Gu? Fang Li. She felt as if she had been electrocuted, and her fingertips clenched involuntarily. What happened? Did he remember what happened last night? Then why, when I saw her so early in the morning, I could act as if nothing had happened? Good, repressed. On their way to the Civil Affairs Bureau, Fang Li was in a daze. She didn't fully react until she completed the process and got the marriage certificate. In the sunlight, the little red notebook shines brightly. Only then did Fang Li realize that she had become Mrs. Gu in full sense of the word. However, the groom was not Gu Mingzhou whom she had fantasized about thousands of times. It was a man with the same surname as him but completely unrelated to him, Gu Zhaoting. Gu Zhaoting's deep eyes fell into Fang Li's eyes. Are you thinking about another man? Fang Li's eyes were dim. The sour emotion quietly climbed up to my heart. I'm not feeling sad for Gu Mingzhou. But it was for herself who had been obsessed with it for many years. Gu Zhaoting lowered his eyes and wrapped his big hands around her fingertips. Before Fang Li could react, he put a diamond ring on her ring finger. The style isn't overly high profile, but that's what she likes. Chapter 27, Flirting Until My Legs Go Limp. Gu Zhaoting tightly grasped Fang Li's slender white wrist, and Fang Li's heartbeat went completely out of control. Then, she heard his magnetic voice whispering in her ear, from now on, you can only think of me in this position. He stretched out 2 fingers and tapped lightly between Fang Li's eyebrows. Fang Li nodded subconsciously, but then she realized that something seemed to be wrong. We don't seem to know each other well. How did the situation as a strange couple suddenly progress to the point where they needed to think about him? Sleeping together and kissing each other, if this is not familiarity, then what is it? Gu Zhaoting was at ease, his warm breath spraying on her earlobe. On the busy street, Fang Li's heartbeat suddenly quickened and her fingertips couldn't help but curl up. Meeting Gu Zhaoting's deep eyes, she took a deep breath and felt her ears burning. After the two of them returned home and took a short rest, Fang Li prepared to take Gu Zhaoting to the supermarket. Their house was as clean as a model room, but lacked a sense of life, so she needed to buy some daily necessities. But, thinking about the evening, Fang Li felt inexplicably nervous. Gu Zhaoting drank too much last night and spent their whole night on the sofa. But what about tonight? Since we are married, we should probably live together. At this moment, Fang Li's phone suddenly rang. Fang Li looked down. It was a text message from Song Yu, my plane has landed. Let's go out for dinner tonight. Fang Li pursed her lips and subconsciously glanced in the direction of the room. The man had a tall and straight posture. After changing his clothes, he walked out with his long legs. Fang Li held her phone and quickly replied, it may not be convenient. I'm getting married today. Song Yu, what's going on? Fang Li, I'll explain it to you later. Song Yu was worried, have you been deceived? Although Gu Mingzhou is indeed a scumbag, you can't just give up on yourself and just grab a random man to get along with, right? Fang Li pursed her lips and saw Gu Zhaoting go to the bathroom. She lowered her head and continued typing. It's not like I just grabbed a random man to marry. I saved his life. Song Yu, promise yourself. Are you two so old-fashioned? Do you have any photos? Send them to me. Fang Li, no. The only photo of them together is the one that was just on their marriage certificate. However, as soon as he returned home, Gu Zhaoting took the marriage certificate and locked it in the safe. Song Yu, then. You always want to know his name, right? What's your husband's name? Fang Li, Gu. Just after typing a word, an enlarged face of Gu Zhaoting suddenly appeared in front of him. Who are you messaging? His cool breath came from behind, and Fang Li felt inexplicably nervous. She quickly put away her phone and stuffed it into her pocket. A friend. Gu Zhaoting didn't ask any more questions, and the two of them went out together. At the same time. Buzz. Gu Mingzhou's cell phone on the table suddenly rang, and he saw it was Fang Li calling. A hint of ridicule appeared at the corner of his lips. At a press conference yesterday, Gu Mingzhou announced in front of the media that his engagement partner had long been changed to Fang Yu Xin, thus calming down the incident at the hotel. Isn't it too late for Fang Li to call him now and ask him to change his mind? However, Gu Mingzhou still wanted to hear how Fang Li would win him back this time. When the phone rang for the fifth time, Gu Mingzhou slowly answered it. Unexpectedly, as soon as I put it to my ear, the other party hung up. The busy tone of beep 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 made Gu Mingzhou frown. What's going on? Fang Li would never hang up on him, even if he deliberately ignored her calls every time. Fang Li would also let the phone hang up automatically after the sixth ring, and then call again after half a minute. Thinking of this, Gu Mingzhou put the phone back on the table and waited for it to light up again. But this time, after waiting for 2 full minutes, the screen was still black. Gu Mingzhou touched his cheek with the tip of his tongue, and a hint of cruelty flashed in his eyes. After all this fuss, Fang Li is probably teasing him, right? Do you want to attract his attention by this method? Do you want him to call you back out of curiosity? That's a good plan. At this moment, Fang Li, who was shopping in the supermarket, didn't know that she forgot to lock her phone and automatically called Gu Mingzhou, who was on the blacklist. She found that her new husband had a cold and aloof air. In order to make Gu Zhaoting more down to earth, Fang Li handed over the heavy responsibility of pushing the shopping cart to him. She skillfully purchased items in the daily necessities area, and Gu Zhaoting followed quietly behind her. At first glance, it seemed quite harmonious. Suddenly, Gu Zhaoting's cell phone rang. He stopped, looked up in the direction Fang Li left, and answered the phone. There was a lot of noise on the other end of the phone. Pei Jingxing's voice was too loud, and it came out noisily. Old Gu, didn't you say you were getting married today? The venue has been warmed up for you, why haven't you brought the person yet? Gu Mingzhou frowned, his eyes falling on Fang Li's back. She was standing on tiptoe, trying to reach the large bucket of laundry detergent on the top shelf. The shelves were too high and she was struggling, her long hair drawing an arc in the air. Gu Zhaoting held the phone and whispered, "There are too many people. I'm afraid you might scare her." "I won't go." Pei Jingxing laughed, "We don't eat humans. Look at how you protect us like a treasure. On this happy day, you, the protagonist, won't come." Gu Zhaoting said nothing, pushed the cart and walked up to Fang Li. With a wave of his hand, he easily helped Fang Li take down the bucket of laundry detergent and put it into the shopping cart. Fang Li turned around, looked at him with gratitude and smiled. Gu Zhaoting curled the corners of his lips slightly. Without saying much, he took a step forward, walked past Fang Li and walked towards the meat area. He selected 2 steaks and put them in the shopping cart. On the other end of the phone, Pei Jingxing's voice continued, "Lao Gu, are you listening? Why is it so noisy over there? Where are you?" Gu Zhaoting said nonchalantly, "I'm accompanying my wife to go shopping in the supermarket. You guys have fun, and the bill will be on me." There was silence on the other end of the phone for 7 or 8 seconds, and then Pei Jingxing cursed, "Fuck, it's really an old lady getting into bed. It made me laugh. You actually know how to go shopping in a supermarket." Gu Zhaoting didn't say anything, perhaps because he was annoyed by Pei Jingxing's chattering, and hung up the phone directly. When Fang Li heard Gu Zhaoting say, "I'm accompanying my wife," her cheeks turned red. Who is he calling? A friend. Would you like some soup? Fang Li came back to her senses in a daze. "Huh. I heard this is very nourishing for women. Gu Zhaoting supported his chin with one hand and signaled the salesperson to put the packaged black chicken into the shopping cart. Fang Li frowned, but wouldn't it be too troublesome to handle the black chicken? Gu Zhaoting's eyes fell on Fang Li. Her skin is extremely white, and her long eyelashes cover her eyes. Looking down, the first thing that catches your eye is her slender waist that is so thin that it cannot be grasped with one hand. Gu Zhaoting's eyes deepened, and he said softly, "It can help you grow meat, it's not a problem." Fang Li's heart softened. But when she looked down at the fair white area, her face suddenly turned red. Gu Zhaoting chuckled, "Let's go, pay the bill, and go home." The subwoofer made Fang Li's legs go weak. "But after getting the marriage certificate, we have to share a room together after all."